We have an exciting day ahead of us, so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Dr. Bofi.
Here.
Mr. Castillo.
Here.
Dr. Davis.
Here.
Miss Ellis.
Here.
Mr. Garvey. Mr. Garvey is not present. Ms. Holloway.
Here.
Mr. Mellerin.
Here.
Mr. Morris.
Here.
Ms. Orange Jones. Ms. Orange Jones is not present. Mr. Rock.
Here.
Ms. Fauché.
Here. We have a quorum. Thank you very much. What is our first item? Is the introductions.
The introductions.
Members, can I have a motion to receive the introductions? Thank you, Mr. Rock, second by Ms. Fauché. So, BESE members, typically we have retreats in August. Given everybody's August schedule, we had decided to move this to June of this year. And this year, for our retreat, we have AJ Crabell with us, and he is going to actually come a little later on the agenda, and he'll be able to give you more about his background. I believe each of you have been able to engage with him or someone on his staff about your work on BESE and your priorities. The goal for us today, though, is to step back and think about what practices do we have in place that we need to keep, and what might we need to add to our routines in order to better serve the students of this state. So in my reading of Mr. Crabell's work, he says outcomes for students don't change until adult behaviors change. And I'm sure if I mess that up, he'll correct me a little later, but that is the idea behind what he is going to be presenting today. And so I just wanted to give you this background. Some of us, the majority of us, are going to be rolling off the board at the end of the year, but then we have others who will be running for re-election to the board. And so we just want to make sure that we have the best practices and routines in place so that the students of this state are best served. So that's it on the introductions. And then our first item is a consideration of a discussion regarding the elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund and overall BESE Department of Ed planning presented by the Department of Education. So can I get a motion to receive that? Thank you. That was Dr. Davis and Ms. Ellis. And I will turn the floor over.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Bofi. So today we're excited to be able to share with the board something that's quite epic. It is our educational progress in charts dashboard and tool that we've been working on for quite some time. This particular dashboard will do a couple things. One, it will show at the state and system level progress towards critical agency and board goals in fairly granular fashion, more so than we've ever been able to do. And then also relative to the pandemic recovery dollars, the ESSER dollars, that will show those investments with more specificity even than the Louisiana Comeback Dashboard has been able to do for the last couple of years. So this is a really good tool for us. It furthers our commitment to looking at academic return on investment, but also public transparency. And so I'm going to ask Danielle Mitchell and Ashley Townsend to make this presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brumley, and good morning all. Danielle Mitchell with the Louisiana Department of Education. And I have Ashley Townsend, who is helping to navigate the dashboard as we go through the new EPIC dashboard. So it's our education progress and investments charts. I'm excited to share this innovative tool. As Dr. Brumley mentioned, it does build upon two different tools that have been previously released. First is the Louisiana Comeback website, where all of our school systems have posted their plans for how they are investing dollars to help their students recover academically. And then secondly, the fiscal dashboard that we released a couple of years ago that pulls information straight from EGMS. So this dynamic tool does build upon those, but as Dr. Brumley stated, it's really starting with our 6 critical goals, which show a student's successful progression from birth through graduation. And this is how we as an agency hold ourselves accountable for the success and for the work that we do. Each year, we will annually review the initiatives and the projects. And as you see in the second part of this dashboard, we have our priority objectives and indicators. So this is the work day to day that we are doing as a state agency to help us achieve the 6 critical goals. Then the third component is looking at how our school systems have budgeted their ESSER funds, and that overlays with student outcomes. Again, you'll hear throughout the presentation today that we are not trying to draw any conclusions, but rather provide information to not only be transparent, but to make sure that all of our stakeholders have access to this information and can ask the right questions. So we'll go ahead and start with our 6 critical goals. And today, what we're going to do is just demonstrate and walk through a couple of them. We do have a handout that we will provide to you that has a summary of each of the 6 critical goals as well as our targets. But mindful of time, we will kind of walk through the first 2. So first we look at just in general the dashboard overview. Throughout you will see the information icons, and so that's the little teal circle with the eye in it. And at any point any user can hover over that and they can get more information or details about the data that they are seeing. So first critical goal that we'll look at is all students enter kindergarten ready. So the specific indicator here is the percentage of the kindergarten students performing on or above grade level on literacy screeners. So for each of the critical goals, you'll see the indicator in orange just underneath it. Then what you'll see, and this same kind of organization goes throughout each of the critical goals, is an ability to look at this information by student group or by specific school system. So for demonstration purposes, we will look at Louisiana and then also click on a parish to demonstrate how this overlays on the line plot below it. So right now we'll go ahead and click, and we will highlight, I believe it's Acadia Parish for this specific critical goal. And as we can see, just like much of the state, we had a dip in between 19 and 20, but then we see Acadia Parish did lots of great work. And so if you hover over those icons, you'll be able to see Louisiana's percentage, and then you'll be able to see Acadia's. If I were to click on Acadia's dot, what populates in the middle is a deeper dive of their information. So I'm able to see this by race or by special population. And I can see a year-over-year comparison with that teal line showing the average. So if I click on by special population at the bottom, it just shows a different way to view and to analyze this information. Additionally, as you can see, the dot is highlighted in the third chart, the scatter plot. And what this really shows me is how are school systems performing based on the way that I've analyzed the data. So right here, I'm looking at, for example, the percentage of economically disadvantaged students compared with the percent of students in kindergarten who are performing on or above grade level. So if I wanted to identify models of excellence, who is performing really well and has a comparable percentage of economically disadvantaged students. So I could hover over and I see that, for example, Madison Parish has 45% of their kindergarten students performing on or above grade level on the literacy screeners, and they have a very high economically disadvantaged population. So this would be an opportunity to potentially go and see what are they doing. How can we learn from them if we have similar students, similar school makeup, and opportunities to collaborate across the state. So with that, we'll go ahead and exit from this. And again, I did just want to scroll down to the very bottom and call out a couple of features. So first, you'll be able to, or any user will be able to download a PDF of this information. Secondly, throughout the dashboard, you'll see an icon that says share your feedback. We really want to encourage all stakeholders to submit questions as well as suggestions for how we can continue to evolve this tool to meet the needs of all of our constituents. So we'll go ahead now and look at critical goal number 2. So this is students exiting 3rd grade, ready for 4th grade, and we're looking at the specific indicator of students performing mastery and above on the LEAP, the statewide assessment. So very similar to the first dashboard, what you'll see here is one layer more where you can look at the specific subjects. And so this will be the same throughout critical goal number 2 and critical goal number 3. So for example, we just toggled from ELA to math. And again, I can look at all students, or I can select a special population at the top. To walk through critical goal number 2, the difference that you see between this and the first goal is that for the remaining critical goals, we have set targets, 2027 targets. We don't have one for the first critical goal yet because we know that we are changing literacy screeners. Once we have that new literacy screener in place, we will then set that baseline. But for here, 3rd grade math, we've set a target of 55%. We've gone through each of the targets with Dr. Chasson and Dr. Singleton and made sure that we were not only ambitious, but making targets that are attainable and reflective of the work that we're doing. So for example, if I were to click on ELA, I'm seeing that our target in 2027 is to go to 60%. Given the literacy work that we've done and all of the investments that our school systems have made, we do believe that this is not only ambitious, but attainable. And then if I go to math, knowing that math refresh is a newer body of work, and the performance year over year historically as well as nationally, we do believe that a target of 55% is not only, again, ambitious, but attainable. So this is the type of logic that we've used throughout the critical goal dashboard component.
Is the goal set for the next year or some period of time further than that?
Great question. So if you look at the bar, it's a 2027 target. So we have set this for 3, 4, 5 years out. And so we will continue to look year over year at our performance and make adjustments as needed. You're welcome. Okay, so now we'll go into, again, just demonstrating the components and the features of each of these dashboards. So for critical goal number 2, we're going to look at math or actually let's go back to ELA. And we're going to click on a parish. And for each of these, you'll be able to have the drop down so we can click on Allen Parish. But in addition, if I wanted to select another parish or another LEA, I can type it in. So I'm able to toggle quickly to that LEA. So here we're selecting Delhi Charter School. And what you see now is the 3 lines of those with Louisiana in purple. So now I can bring my cursor down and kind of toggle over the dots in the line plot. And it's able to show me specifically what I'm looking at. And if I were to click on Allen Parish's, one of Allen Parish's dots in the middle, again, I'm able to see a deeper dive of that year over year comparison, either by special population or by race. Similar to the very first dashboard, again, we can look to identify those LEAs that have a particular special population or demographic that we are interested in comparing and looking at the percentage of students who are performing mastery or above on a statewide assessment. And again, that can be used to identify potentially an LEA who is doing some incredible work and an opportunity to learn from. So with that, we will go ahead and exit out of the critical goals dashboard and toggle over to the priority objectives and indicators. And again, this is reflective of the annual work that we do as an agency to support the achievement of the 6 critical goals. This dashboard is organized by the 5 priorities that we've set as an agency, and we believe the right work is moving the needle for our kids. And so what you'll see is annually we will review this and update it to be reflective of the work that we're gonna do. So across the top, you'll see each of the priorities, and if I wanted to just look at a particular one, I could click on that one and it would take away the rest of them and I could do a deeper dive. If I click back on P1, then it'll refresh and bring them all up. Again, you have an export feature to download and print out this information as you wish. So what we'll also look at here is the hide and filter options, and you're able to go and select very specific indicators that may be of interest to you. So for this, we'll unselect all, and we'll select just a couple to demonstrate how we can use this feature to drill down. So we'll select, let's do pre-educator pathway, and you can also go up to the bar and type it in. Yep, right there, perfect. So we'll look at pre-educator pathway, and I can select that. The number of school systems implementing, or the number of students participating in pre-educator pathways. Then we'll look at strong school systems. And then last, we'll look at IGPs. So once we select these, it may be listed under individual graduation plan, but we can just look at the 2 that we have up. And so once you select these, you'll see on the column at the beginning, the P4, P5, just identifying the priority. But then you look at the initiative and the project. So first, we'll look at the pre-educator pathway. And the objective here is, if I hover over it, I'm able to see the full objective. And it's the teaching and learning activity through the Educator Development Division will support school systems to meet the needs of their educator workforce by cultivating the pre-educator pathway to support a grow your own model. So then if I toggle over to the indicator, this is how are we measuring that success. So if the objective is what is the outcome we would like to see, then the indicator is what we're looking at to tell us are we on track to meet that objective. So here we're saying that we are on track, and if we hover over to the prior state and to the current state, we're able to see the year for which that information is applicable. Then I'm able to see my target is 1,000 for 22-23, and if I click over the check mark that you see there, I'm just going to get more information about this target and about the indicator. So, for example, with this one, we do believe that the data in relation to the target will be available in early 2023, but based on some of the work that's been done, we do believe that we will meet that target. Additionally, you're able to see information about the indicator. So, same thing with the one below. If we were to hover over the check mark there, we're looking at our strong school systems. We are on track to meet this target, and looking at the cohorts that are being added through Supra for next year. We see that we had 15 in the first year, 21-22. The second year, we added 10 more, so we had a total of 25. This upcoming year, we're very excited to have 20 other LEAs participate in this really substantial and impactful pilot. And so we do believe we're going to be on track to meet that target. And then any other indicators that you would want to see or a user would want to see, they could again just click the show and hide filter option and go through those as they see fit. So that is our progress monitoring for the key objectives and indicators. Lastly, we'll look at the investments. So with this is how the school systems have budgeted their dollars in EGMS, because that is going to provide a better comprehensive picture of exactly how they are planning to use these funds. Just a reminder that these funds work on a reimbursement basis. So the amount spent versus the work that's been done will always lag behind. That's why we chose to use how school systems have budgeted their dollars. So what you see first is basically like a tree map. If we know the entire square is 100%, it's just breaking it up to show correlation between the category and the percentage of dollars that have been invested. At the beginning of the pandemic, all of the efforts were around not only making sure that we could open schools and get our students back in person, but making sure that we were able to maintain safe environments. So we do see a lot of investment in that safe return to school bucket. The other thing that we want to call out is these categories were created through a partnership with LSU and Westat and building an analytics to take each of the individual LEA's budgets submitted in EGMS and identify keywords that would basically put that line item into a rolled up bucket, or what you see here, the categories. So this is not an exact science, but it is very much a good indication of how they are spending their dollars. So if I were to click on one of these, for example, a safe return to school, what I see next to it is a breakdown of the categories, kind of subcategories for that larger category that you see in the tree map. And I can kind of toggle over and even drill down further. So if I go back and click on the safe return to school and I select another category such as summer learning, we're able to see again what are those kind of subcategories where investments were made to support summer learning. In addition to looking at those subcategories, I can also look at school systems. How have school systems invested their dollars? So I can click on the switch right above. We'll say no, yeah. And we can click on the switch right above, and all this does is it flips it over to a school system view for this same information. I can look at the total amount spent, or I can toggle over and look at the percent. And if I look at the percent, I'm also able to bring my cursor down and just scan over some of the different subcategories for each of those LEAs that you see listed and drill down that information. I can additionally select one or two or multiple LEAs if I want to drill that down specifically. Now we're going to look at the investment and outcomes tab of this dashboard. And what this is going to show is an overlay of not only how school systems have invested these dollars, but putting that with student outcomes. So again, this is not to draw conclusions, but to simply provide a level of information for our stakeholders. So here we're looking at a critical goal. So for example, if I wanted to select a critical goal, and we can do 8th grade ELA, for example, and I want to see how school systems have not only grown or made progress year over year, but I'm also able to see, based on some investments, how that compares across our state. So, for example, if we're looking at the percentage of 8th grade students performing at mastery and above, I'm looking at 2021 versus 2019, or I can look at 2022 versus 2019, both of which give us a pre-pandemic mark. I can click on the value to display and see, and basically I can change how I want to see that information. Do I want to see just prior year comparison, year over year, or change from 2019? So this provides a year over year analysis, which is just a different way to see the information. Then I can look at either I can select specific school systems, but right now we'll keep it on all, and then I can go to the middle one where it says change access to the percent of total investment, and we can look at, for example, high quality instructional materials. So what this is simply going to show me is what is the percent of an investment that has been made by our school systems, and how does that overlay against the year-over-year change for this particular critical goal. So I can also change from high-quality instructional materials. I can select a different one, such as high-dosage tutoring. And again, I'm able to see school systems and the percent of their dollars that they've invested and how that compares with their student outcomes year over year. So we just toggled over, I believe it was St. James Parish. And if I were to click or look at this, I see that 23% of their investment went to high dosage tutoring, and 58%, or they had a 58% growth for their students performing mastery and above on their 8th grade assessment. When I look at the last chart, what I'm able to see there is a drill down of their investments. So this is showing me the percent of their investments by each of the subcategories. So for example, if I look at the high dosage tutoring benefits and salaries, that makes sense given that likely they have paid for their teachers to provide or other personnel to come in and provide that high dosage tutoring. And I can look at the total amount. So above this chart, right now we're looking at percent, but I can also look at the total dollar amount that they have budgeted to invest in this particular category. So this just provides a deeper level of information for users. So additionally, if we go back out, one thing that I wanted to just call attention back to our home page is the ability to export, if we scroll down to the bottom of the page, all of this information in their raw data files or raw data Excel files, and that information will be available to all of our stakeholders at a click of a button. So with that, that is the conclusion of the overview for this EPIC dashboard, and thank you all not only for your hard work for our students every day, but for pushing us as the agency to continue to be transparent and provide this information readily and make it readily available to all of our stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Morris?
Yeah, so 2 questions. One, if we have any follow-up questions, you're the point contact for that, or somebody else, or how do we follow up questions?
Yes, you can reach out to me directly for any questions related to the EPIC dashboard.
Okay, and the second question, while we're here, can you show me where we find attendance on here?
Yes, you can look at, so attendance, if we look at our priority objectives and indicators, and I click on P1, and we'll need to clear the filter. We'll select all.
Slow down, but we lost our monitors.
Our monitors have been blinking out.
Oh, is that why I'll keep, okay. Turn it around, I was like.
Every now and then we'll right there. They're back, oh, they were on and now they're back off.
So actually, it's right here, P1, the first one, so the initiative/project is engagement and attendance. The objective is to provide support to school systems to build capacity at the local level and utilize attendance tracking tools to improve student engagement and attendance. There are 2 indicators that support this objective that we are tracking. First is student attendance rates at all schools. And we see that we are on track to meet this. And if we hover over the check mark, this is just going to provide a little bit more information. The average daily attendance rate is 95%, and that's the national standard set by USDE. Additionally, this means that students will miss no more than an average of 9.5 days. So then we can go and look at our prior state for 21, then our current state, which of course is 22, and our target for this year, we won't have this data until later, but is 95%, which is that national target. The second indicator for this objective is truancy. And we know that we are supporting our systems with not only updating the way that they are reporting this, but if we hover over the check mark here, we have done more awareness of coding in the systems and making sure that we are getting the most accurate data, but also setting our targets from 45.2 of last year to the following year, or this year being 42%. And of course, we will adjust these targets as we get more information and update the dashboard once new data is available.
Why would our target for truancy be higher than the current state? Prior state, sorry.
So our current state, or the most recent data, is 45.2. 42 is getting us closer to the prior state.
It's also been at the prior state is 40%, and our target is 42%. That's okay, we can talk about it later. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Davis?
So first, I love this. I have a couple of questions. I noticed that the download is a PDF format. Is there any way that people are going to be able to get any of this data like in a more numerical, analytic, friendly format like Excel or something like that? If people want to download straight into something that lets them do that?
Yes, ma'am. So on the home page, we have 2 Excel options to download. First is the critical goal data, and that is a large file that's going to be every school system and every critical goal. And then, of course, the ESSER data. What we don't have right now, but we can certainly embed it, and actually, I believe in the PDF download feature for the second dashboard, you can select an Excel format. So you should be able to download all of this information in those 2 formats.
And then the second question is around, so as we move forward in time and we continue to build this out, will we be able to go and get historical data on the indicators? So like 5 years from now, will we be able to access where we were on truancy and compare it to where we are in current day? Because I know right now we just have 2 or 3 years worth of data, and it's great to be able to see that, but I'm worried about kind of historical trends in that. So just thinking about that for future stuff.
Absolutely. Something that we can certainly look at how we can embed in.
Okay. And then where is this located on our website?
We are going to be putting it on our website in a banner tomorrow and publicly releasing that. It'll be available.
It's really exciting. I'm teaching a policy evaluation class, and I think I'm going to put kids in groups, and all of it's going to be on this. So I'm very excited. Thank you.
Thank you.
And members, I'll add, as soon as we finish with this part of the presentation, we're going to have them restart the system, so hopefully we won't have the issue with the technology. Mr. Morris, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say thank you. I know this is extraordinary effort, a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of detail. I think there's a lot of value here, so just applaud you for this effort and everybody that was involved, and thank you. I think there's a lot of value for the state and for our students, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have questions or comments?
When is it available? Tomorrow?
Tomorrow. All right. Yes, thank you so much, and thank you for engaging us in the process. It was great to be part of the process, so thank you.
Thank you all.
All right. So board members, any objection to receiving that update? Hearing none, motion passes. And then we are going to take a short break and allow them to restart this, our computer system before we go into the next item.
Just for me to think about it. Yes. What would it say?
Yeah, we got to reset.
They gotta restart this thing. We'll restart the next No, but we have to restart.
Turn it back on.
I'm ready. Once it comes back up, you'll be ready to go. Awesome.
30 seconds. There we go.
How's it going?
Hi, I'm Sam.
Still see you in the flesh.
Thank you. You too. Looking forward to it.
It's been a good day.
Get in yesterday?
Yeah, I got last, been up since 4, trying to get everything done that had to be done today since I'll be here.
Understood. Well, thanks for joining.
But happy to be here.
My youngest is going into 8th grade at Pelham High School. Was the only 8th grader that played in junior varsity. And so she has to get up at 5:45 and leave for like 6:15. She pushes Pelham 6:30. Yes, wake up, push up. I know, but you know, but it's not supposed to be 8th grade. It's supposed to be freshman. Walked out and made the team. No, I don't know. It's she's excited for me to stand out. 8th grade. So she's doing it then.
Get started again, board members. So we are going, we're already on item 1.4. Am I going to need to use my teacher voice? So, items 1.4. It is consideration of effective education system governance practices presented by A.J. Cravell, and I need a motion to receive. Thank you, Ms. Holloway, seconded by Ms. Ellis. All right, we're ready, sir.
Good morning. You have something to write with, something to write on. We will begin our time with a quiz. And y'all, normally y'all on the other side of this whole assessment thing, so I figured we'll switch it up for today. First question. And before you write anything, you want to take a moment to reflect. So don't write anything yet, but begin to think about why is it that school systems exist? Why do school systems exist? Don't write anything yet, but begin to reflect on it. You can think at global level, obviously your role is global level across the state. Why is it that school systems exist? And as you reflect on it, try to narrow it down to the core, to the essence. Try to think of, not kind of in a whole lot of words, but in the real economy of language. Why is it that school systems exist? And when you've done all these things, first question, in 10 words or less, why do school systems exist? In 10 words or less, why do school systems exist? That's question number one. In 10 words or less, why do school systems exist? Question number one is, why do school systems exist? Question number two, begin to imagine a range from 0 to 10. 0 describing not at all focused. There is no time, there is no energy, there is no intentionality poured into something. The 0 is not at all focused. Whereas number 10 is complete, absolute focus. Every moment, every resource, every aspect of our energy is poured in narrowly into this one thing. 10 is complete and absolute focus. 0 is the complete lack of focus. So to range from 0 to 10. Question number 2. How focused is this board on the reason for which school systems exist? Question number 1 is, why do school systems exist? Question number 2, on a scale of 0 to 10, how focused is this board on the reason for which school systems exist? 0 being not at all focused, 10 being excessively and absolutely focused. Question number 3. 0 to 10, same scale. As a member of this body, how focused am I on the reason for which school systems exist? Number 1 is, why do school systems exist? Number 2 is, on 0 to 10, how focused is this body? Number 3, how focused am I? Number 4, what are the board's goals? What are the board's adopted goals? number 4, what are the board's adopted goals? And then number 5, if you had to pick the 3 highest leveraged practices that a board can engage in, that allows it to be focused on the reason for which school systems exist, what would those 3 practices be? If you had to pick the 3 highest leveraged practices that you can think of, that the board might engage in, that would allow it to be focused on the reason for which school systems exist, what would those practices be? What are the things that the board could do? What are practices of the board, governance practices? What are things that the board could do that would be the highest leverage practices that allow it to be focused on the reason for which school systems exist? That's question number 5. You can only pick 3 practices that are the highest leverage practices you can think of that if we do these 3 things, this will really allow us to focus on why school systems exist. What would those top 3 practices be? And we need more time, or folks pretty good? All right. Let's start with question number 1. In 10 words or less, why do school systems exist? Who will be the first to share? Yeah, why do school systems exist?
Use your mic, Ronnie.
So our students can reach their full potential.
So our students can reach their full potential. Why is that important to you? Why is it important to you that students reach their full potential?
Because that's going to determine the future of our state.
Okay. This is about the welfare of the entire state, and my sense is you're saying it's inextricably intertwined with the likelihood of our students reaching their full potential. Gotcha. Thank you. Who will be the next issue? Yeah, why do school systems exist?
Maximize the gifts of every child to be productive community members.
Maximize the gifts of every child to be productive community members. Why is that important to you?
Because we live in a community and in society, everyone must contribute, and each and every person has innate gifts that it's our job to help bring out and maximize in every individual.
Every individual's got gifts that we all do better off when we put in the work to maximize everybody's gifts. Yeah. Why do school systems exist?
To educate children to be productive citizens in society.
Educate children to be productive citizens in society. Why is that important to you?
It's important because it reduces the poverty level, crime, and also special ed classifications, etc.
Sounds like this is about quality of life for you.
Quality of life.
Gotcha. In 10 words or less, why do school systems, we're coming to everybody, so be prepared. Yeah, why do school systems exist?
To grow children into adults who contribute to the public good.
grow children into adults who contribute to the public good. Did I hear that correctly? Yeah, why is that important to you?
I think it brings in a lot of what others have already talked about, that sense of community, and so that there is a public good out there that if we're all part of it, it lifts all of us up.
The public good, if we're all part of it, it lifts everybody up. Yeah, and so just to clarify, so you all understand how the day works. If you're on the dais, you're fair game. So just be prepared. I'm a strong believer in cold call. That being said, before we get to that level, who will be the next to share? Why do school systems exist? In 10 words or less.
School systems exist to provide a quality education for students.
To exist to provide a quality education for students. Why is that important?
For the same reasons that everybody else is talking about, to maximize their gifts, to contribute to the public good, so that we all have a better quality of life.
It's not about just a quality of life for the students. You see that as an access to a better quality of life for all of us.
For all of us.
Gotcha. Why do school systems exist? Who'll be the next issue?
Okay.
Yeah.
I said to give opportunity and educate the students within our society. I didn't get real specific, but opportunity was a key word for me.
Give opportunity for students to contribute to society?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
why is the term opportunity so important to you?
I think that, there's an equity piece for me that I just want to see that all students receive a great education, no matter where they're from, socioeconomics, where they live, rural, urban, whatever.
If I'm understanding, it sounds like you're insisting that some students may start in different places, but you want all of them to be able to have access to opportunity.
Yeah.
Got it. Regardless of which part of the state they live in.
Right.
Good. Who will be the next to share? Why do school systems exist? In 10 words or less.
Give students basic skills to prepare them for life.
Give students the basic skills to prepare them for life. Why are basic skills important to you?
Without the basic skills, no matter what you do after school, if you don't have those basic skills, you're not going to be successful. You're not going to contribute to society. You're not going to have all the other reasons that everybody said. Those basic skills are the foundation for everything.
There's some building blocks, some foundational building blocks, and our responsibility is to make sure those happen for every kid. Got it? In 10 words or less, why do school systems exist? And we've got maybe 3, 4 folks who would dash right up the front. In 10 words or less, why do school systems exist? Who'll be the next to share?
Are we all going to be required to share?
I'm coming to a microphone near you. If
Looking that way.
you've chosen to be on the dais today, welcome to the conversation.
If I'm going to sit in the audience.
And the audience is a safer but not 100% safe location.
I was hoping to get passed over, but it's looking like I'll be able to. I'll share. I have to prepare our students for success in life.
Well, what does it mean to prepare a student for success in life?
I think part of that depends on what the student thinks success is. I could define it for the student, but I think some of that has to be defined by the student's family themselves.
So did you say part of that's defined by the student? So do I take your meaning that part of that is the state has to define what are minimum expectations, but then a whole lot of the rest of that has to be defined, I think you said, by the family and the student?
Well, now we're going beyond 10 words.
No, I'm trying to understand the meaning behind your 10 words.
It ties in with what some of the other people have said. Giving the students basic skills so that they can use it to achieve what they think is success.
Yeah.
But for different students, it's different skills.
It'll be different things.
And that's why one of I think the last question you had was, what 3 things should we focus on or something like that? And
Oh, yeah.
my 3 things is giving parents choice and students choices in their education, because their definition of success may be different from mine, and if they have a choice in which basic skills they get delivered to them, then it will help them achieve their definition of success.
Gotcha. No, I think I take your meaning. I live next door in Texas. When I'm working with school districts on the Gulf Coast, I hear very different things from communities that are about what they want their students to know and be able to do that would set them up for success in that part of the state. Then I hear from West Texas, where they're pulling oil out of the ground, and East Texas, they're growing every delicious thing. And so I hear you say kind of where people are at might have an impact on what their priorities are, and that should be part of it. Gotcha. Thank you for sharing. Who will be the next to share? In 10 words or less, why do school systems exist? I think you're kind of okay. And then it sounds like we're saving the best for last, I guess. Yeah, why do school systems exist?
School systems exist to educate our students for life experiences.
The school systems exist to educate our students for life experiences. Why is that important to you?
That's important because you never know what area in life a child's going to go. You may have, for example, in the area where I may be in the agricultural area.
Yeah.
You may be in an industrial area. So it's to educate for life experiences that you need in college life.
So some areas might be agricultural, some might be industrial, but whatever experiences, whatever circumstances students encounter, we want to be ready for.
Correct.
Gotcha. Thank you much. Who will be the next issue? I think that's you.
All of my mind.
I have one. Oh, were you gonna go, Kay?
Yeah, I think they call, I mean, I agree with Jim. I mean, I think there's much more to this question than can be described in 10 words philosophically. But,
Certainly.
I guess I would just say to prepare all students, for successful lives and meaningful contributions.
To prepare all students for successful lives and meaningful contributions. Why is that important to you?
It's why I do the work every day. I'm all in every day to get better outcomes for Louisiana kids because I believe that we can, we are, and we will get better outcomes for Louisiana kids and families. And so it's not just about little Johnny who's a third grader, it's about that little Johnny will be John one day as an adult male who needs to be able to have a standard of living that he enjoys, where he can help support a family, where he can make meaningful contributions to this community, as Superintendent Boucher mentioned. And so when we're talking about third grade reading, we're not talking about just to make sure a kid can read by the end of third grade. We're talking about little Johnny is going to be John one day.
It's going to be John Senior, maybe.
So that's important.
Thank you much. As you were listening, do you have one for us?
I have represented.
Ms. Davis, you're gonna have to take the mic. I am getting text messages about people watching us online, and so I just wanna make sure we're all using our mics. AJ, you might need to pull yours a little closer.
So I'll just say this from here. I think they represent the community's voice in public education and provide governance for locals and in the administration of state and federal law.
Yeah, that was definitely not 10 words.
Represent the community voice in public education.
Represent the community voice in public education. What did you notice? As you were listening to everybody who responded to this question, what did you notice? Who will be the first to share?
I noticed a strong student focus.
It's kind of hard to miss.
I noticed more of a strong community focus.
The strong community focus as well, a connection between the student and the community. That there are obligations back and forth between.
Obligations back and forth. I'm not sure if I noticed as much of a strong student focus the way I would describe it.
Yeah, distinguish for us. So a lot of people talk about students, but and certainly a lot of people talk about community, but you heard it more of a community focus than a student focus. Say more about that.
I mean, how do I read into 10 words or less? But in terms of, part of what I'm looking at is when I talk about maximizing the gifts of each and every student.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we are as focused on that as I would like us to be. Because to build a strong community and make sure that everyone is a contributing member of that community, each and every person and their gifts must be valued and encouraged and, I guess, helped to maximize that potential. And I'm not sure that we're as focused on that as we are on a collective sense of standards or guidelines for every child.
So in the answers you heard, what you heard was less a focus on how do we maximize potential for individual child and more on what are the expectations we have overall for all children.
Right.
Gotcha. I appreciate that distinction. Thank you. Who else? Oh, as you were listening to your colleagues share, what did you hear? What did you notice?
I thought the common denominator was outcomes.
Common denominator was outcomes, a sense of what is it that students know and are able to do at the end of their time in the school system. Gotcha. What did you notice? What did you hear? As you listen to your colleagues, what did you notice? What did you hear?
I mean, I really just heard productive member of society. I mean, we've kind of said that over and over, but I think for me, there was this access and opportunity piece that I really wanted to make clear. I think students need the opportunity to then be able to contribute. And whatever that looks like, whatever the LEA's job in that, or whatever our job in that is, whatever it is, but that's the key to me.
Any other reflection of what you heard before we transition? All right. So after describing why school systems exist, you then came up with a score from 0 to 10 on how focused is this body on the reason for which school systems exist. So first you define for yourself how focused what do I think the purpose of school systems are, why do school systems exist? And then you identify a score from 0 to 10, 0 being not at all focused, 10 being completely focused, obsessively focused. How focused is this body? To simplify this, I would really just start at the end and work our way down. What score did you provide for the body overall? How focused do I feel like the body as an entity is on the reason for which school systems exist? You want to get started?
7.
We're just going to work our way on down the road.
6.
7, 6,
7.
7. Pass.
6.
6.
I had high expectations, 8.
8.
7.
7.
6.
6.
6.
All right, so it sounds like we're the 6 3/4 range, 6 1/2, somewhere around there. What did you come up with? What score did you put out?
7.
7. All right. Somewhere between 6 and 7, sounds like most folks are. Why? What would it take for the board to demonstrate a greater focus on why school systems exist? So I think it's, first of all, congratulate you on not having a 10. It's pretty hard to attain given the definition I offered. That I certainly think something below 10 is much more likely and realistic. What would it take for the board to increase its focus? What would it take?
Time.
What would you do with the time? Time is just currency. If you had more time, what would you do with it? Or how would you use the time you have differently? What would it take for the board to be more focused on the reason for which school systems exist?
I think if we got a 10 on the focus, we would have all given you the same answer.
Yeah, no doubt. So one of the indicators that we were at a 10 in focus is I asked you all why do school systems exist, and here pretty much word for word the exact same answer across the days. That would describe a really, really high level of focus. Not a lot of teams reach that bar. And it's worth being clear the more focused and the more aligned any team is, the greater likelihood that it'll accomplish the reason for which it exists. The less aligned, the less focused any team is, there begins to be a degrade in the likelihood that it'll accomplish the reason for which it exists. Yeah, I like to think of it as a canoe. Like if I got a bunch of people in a canoe and we're all rowing in the same direction, that kind of increases the likelihood that we'll probably get the thing done. But if the folks in the front are rowing in that direction and the folks in the back are rowing in that direction, that just means that there's a less likelihood that wherever any of us think we're trying to get to, that we're actually going to get to. That alignment actually matters, that focus actually matters on the likelihood of accomplishing the reason for which we exist. So 10 would be nice, but for us to get there, we'd all have to, at minimum, have a shared understanding of why does our school system exist and something about what is our shared vision of how we get there. What else? What would it take for the board to increase its degree of focus on why the school systems exist? Who will be the next issue? And by the way, folks, this is going to be like this all day. So, like, this is a conversational thing.
I think it's about a reorientation and continuing to get back to, like Ronnie's talking about, everybody having that alignment, that same goal, but continuing to keep that front and center.
I would just add to that and say, I think it's about prioritization. And as everybody has different perspectives, how do we gather those perspectives and align on prioritizing each of them, and then focus on those priorities from there.
I think we have the same broad goal. I mean, just listening to everyone.
Yeah.
We all have the same broad goal, but I think we have differences of opinion on how to get to those goals and what each granularly needs. And those are difficult things to work through, and I think somebody said over their time, we meet a few times a year, I suppose, as we represent communities from all over the state. So it's very, very difficult to have really in-depth, meaningful conversations. Even when we talk about accountability, when we talk about what we would like to see as next steps, it's very, very hard, I think, for this board to have the types of conversations that are necessary to advance those common goals.
I actually want to push back a little bit because something you said earlier was that you heard a distinction in some of the comments, that some of the comments lean toward how do we build out the greatness of each individual child, and some of the comments lean toward how do we create systems that serve all the children across the state. And you drew a distinction between those two.
Yes, sir.
Is that what you mean when you say that, would you describe that as a difference of what our common vision is, or a difference in how we achieve it?
I think it's a difference in how we achieve it. I think that we all want to educate children and provide experiences and opportunities for kids to eventually become productive members of society, as we're talking about it. But many of us view it in different ways. Many of us view it that there are certain basic skills or certain quantifiable goals that each child must reach. And that's basically maybe what we can do as a statewide board. And, I kind of view it that if we had an accountability system or some type of a mechanism to ensure that every child is accounted for within that process, we would be better off. And I think there are ways that that can be done, but it takes a heck of a lot of work and a heck of a lot of time. How do you maximize the potential of, you look at the old bell curve and you've got the bottom quartile of kids and say that every one of those kids is going to achieve mastery on every test that we have, which are part of our vertical goals. I mean, there are other indicators of success for children who have different gifts.
Can I take your meaning to suggest that it's not enough for a governing body to be focused on the what, that if it really wants to maximize its effectiveness, that it has to have some alignment on the how as well?
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Thank you. Anyone else? You reflect on the score that you offered for, what's the board's focus on the reason for which school systems exist. Other thoughts? What would it take for the board to improve its focus? What would it take?
Just like any board or any role you play as a team, there's a lot of trust. So I think trust is part of that too. And I know that that's challenging when you're in a role like this, and you don't spend a lot of time together outside of this role, but trust is important, and recognizing that we are aligned, but there is a common movement toward the same goal, and that we can trust.
Yeah, I don't have really good research for you on the role of trust in elected governing bodies. But there's some, you probably won't be surprised, but not a lot of researchers are researching y'all nearly as much as they're researching and what difference can teachers make, what difference can principals make, superintendents, things of that nature. So I don't have as strong of a body. The things that are closest speak to the board avoiding a place of discord. And I've watched enough of y'all that I have a sense that you all do a pretty decent job while here at the days of avoiding discordant behavior. But I don't know that that gets you all the way to trust. And so I wonder what it would look like for y'all to find a way to build that. I suspect though that I can describe more about the lack of it. The way I think of the harm that the lack of trust can create, so how you get there, I've got some ideas, but I have just less evidence about that. But in terms of what is the impact of not having it, the way I encourage folks to visualize it is just imagine we've all got 10 units of energy that we can deploy to a particular task. And at any given time, in an optimal circumstance, I can apply all 10 units of energy to accomplishing the task. But if I can't trust you, and I don't know why you're doing what you're doing, or we aren't aligned on the how, now instead of spending 10 units of energy on the task, I'm spending 1 unit of energy keeping track of you and what you're up to. And now I've got 9 units of energy focused on the task, but I can't trust you either. And so now I'm spending 1 unit of energy on you, I'm spending 1 unit of energy on you, now I've got 8 units of energy left to actually focus on, and as we multiply this out across a whole bunch of humans in the system, we have this diminishing amount of energy that's actually available for the task as we're busy trying to figure out what everyone else is doing. This is what I think of as the functional cost of not alignment, or perhaps the functional cost of a lack of trust. So it frees up less energy to actually get the job done because I'm spending more energy wondering about what's going on with everybody else. Does that make sense? The way to think about it? Yeah, so I suspect as a board kind of increases its sense of alignment and sense of trust, that might have the effect of freeing up more of the board's energy to focus on the things that matter most. Any other reflections on this? What would it take for the board to grow in its focus on why school systems exist? Any other thoughts before we transition? So to bridge on that theme, on your paper, I want you to write 3 columns. On your paper, I want you to write 3 columns. We're gonna, you're gonna probably need a fresh sheet of paper because we're gonna use the whole piece of paper for these 3 columns. You might even switch and go to the landscape, so part that might be easier. So you got plenty of room for your 3 columns. To frame up the rest of our conversation, I want to add in an idea that you all already appear to have some fluency with because it shows up throughout your strategic plan. But I just want to get us on the same page regarding it and then use it to help guide up a lot of our conversation today. I want to distinguish between inputs, outputs, and outcomes. So not surprisingly, each column will be labeled First column will be labeled inputs, the second column will be labeled outputs, the third column will be labeled outcomes. But then you won't do anything else with your 3 columns for a while, so then you can put that away. So when we talk about inputs, inputs are the resources applied, the resources and strategies applied at the beginning of the cycle. In a school, what are some examples of inputs? What are examples of resources? What are examples of strategies that are knowable at the beginning of the cycle? What are some examples of inputs in the school?
The teachers you hire.
The single most important input that a school system has authority over is the teachers. There's no more important input. If all your other inputs don't work out, but that was exceptional, your students have got a pretty good shot. They're probably gonna be okay. If you do not attend to that input, but you get every other input right, your students are likely gonna suffer. The single most important input that a school system controls is the quality of instruction students experience. The biggest variable of that is your teachers. What are other inputs in the school system? You got a PD plan at the beginning of the year, you probably laid out some resources for PD. PD is an input, it's a resource or strategy knowable at the beginning of the cycle. Things that you know even before the students arrive. Other inputs in the school system.
The kids themselves?
The kids certainly. I only leave them off the list because I'm specifically looking at inputs the school system controls. And we definitely don't get to pick which kids.
We do. I mean, if we're thinking about it from a private perspective or even charter schools and where they locate, that contributes to the inputs. I mean, we'll be dealing with this when we look at charter schools and the socioeconomics diversity of our charter schools. Like I think that, I mean, I agree with you that there's less control over it, but in many respects, our private schools are magnets, that there is an ability to pick and choose among your students to enhance your odds of success.
I learn something new every day. So in Louisiana, charter schools are allowed to pick and choose which students they accept.
They have a lottery, so in theory it's random, but it varies by where the school was located, like choosing to pick their site, right? And so we know that it's not completely random because they don't match the demographics necessarily of an entire district. But I mean, I don't want to focus just on charters because magnet schools do it too with entrance exams and that kind of stuff. But, and then technically, I guess we have parochial schools under our jurisdiction and they clearly have the ability to pick and choose from their student bodies, so.
I'll take your meeting. All right, so we'll include students. Then I would say in the school system, teachers would then, for me, bump to being the second most important input. The first most important thing, that we actually need children here, otherwise we don't really have a school. All right, other inputs in the school system, yeah.
Building relationship within.
So relationships could be an input, I can see that. Other inputs in the school system, what are the resources, what are the strategies?
Instructional resources.
Yeah, you're probably gonna have to build out a curriculum, you're gonna have instructional materials, and preferably you have those before students arrive. Those are inputs in the school system. So those are inputs, those are resources, those are the strategies knowable at the beginning of the cycle.
Do parents count?
Under the way you're describing it, it sounds like it. Under the way I normally talk about it, no. Only I don't think a school system is having control over parents. All right, so those are inputs. So then outputs is the next part in the logic model. Outputs are the results of the inputs. They give you some amount of insight in the midst of the cycle onto the trajectory of the organization. Those are your outputs, measures in the midst of the cycle that give you some sense of idea of where you're at and how you're performing. What are examples of outputs in the school system? Again, these are measures in the midst of the cycle. We're not talking about the end, we're talking about measures in the midst. What are examples of outputs in the school system?
What's the difference between outputs and outcomes?
So, middle of the cycle, end of the cycle.
Can you define the middle of the cycle? What cycle are we talking about?
The school cycle, so generally beginning of school, end of school.
Benchmark.
So you're talking about sixth grade is middle of school, or you're talking about midterm, or I don't understand?
I think more December. Like what might be happening in December. What could you see in December versus what you would see in May?
So,
If we're looking at an annual school cycle.
so technically, I'm talking about both of them. The easiest way to think about this, however, is to start with exactly this, which is what's happening in the midst of the school year. But the reason I said cycle is because it's not always, we're not always talking about the cycle. So for example, if we're talking about college readiness, that cycle may begin in pre-K and run through 12th grade. And so then in that concept, 6th grade would be in the midst of the cycle. But generally, for the use of this, when we're talking about outputs, we're talking about in the midst of the school year.
The assessments,
What type of assessment?
benchmarking,
Benchmark?
yeah, benchmark assessments.
Why a benchmark assessment?
Why?
Yeah, why
See
would
the
that be an
students
example of an
are-
output?
See if the students are growing.
Got it, so you're looking at growth in the midst of the school year. Gotcha. What are other examples of outputs of the school system?
Intervening.
So you could look at what interventions have taken place with students throughout the year. You could take snapshots throughout the year and see, okay, what interventions have we deployed? And that would be output.
And that's going to be coming to your outcome once you know it.
What about attendance? Is that an output?
Attendance, they check that on a regular basis apparently. And so, yeah, you could look at that data throughout the year to get some sense of which direction we're going. I definitely describe that as being in the midst of the cycle. Other examples of outputs, data that's available in the midst of the educational cycle. Other examples.
Observations, teacher observations.
Teacher observations. So you're not just doing that before students arrive, you're not just doing it after students leave. You're doing that in the midst of the cycle to try to figure out where are teachers at and what are we doing to support them to grow it.
Whether or not you're losing teachers during the year.
Yeah, if, come October, there's a bunch of our first years packing up and go home. Trying to figure out, what is our retention rate of teachers within the school year, not even waiting to the end of the school year, like in the midst of the school year. So these are examples of output measures. These are metrics knowable in the midst of the cycle. And they give us some sense of what's the quality of implementation of the inputs, but also some sense of trajectory of which way the organization is growing. These are outputs. And then the third category is outcomes. These are the results measurable at the end of the cycle. Results measurable at the end of the cycle. What are some examples of outcomes in the school system?
Summative assessment.
So summative assessments could be an outcome. If the cycle is a year long, then we look at the end of that cycle and we can see the summative assessment. What are other examples of outcomes in the school system?
Grade promotion.
Promotion, whether or not little AJ made it to the next grade level or not.
Graduation.
If we're thinking of it as a full pre-K-12, the end of that entire cycle might be graduation, maybe. So now your question really starts to come into focus. It does depend on how you define a cycle. Under what context would graduation rates be an output rather than an outcome? In what context might graduation rates be considered an output rather than an outcome? In what context would graduation rates be in the midst of the cycle rather than at the end of the cycle?
A BESE term.
Certainly, if we're thinking about y'all, but more specifically, if we're thinking about
What do you think about career pathway?
yeah, if we're thinking of this in a P20 framework, then high school graduation might just fall in the midst of that rather than at the culmination. So it kind of depends on what is the scope of your cycle, what things fall in the midst of it versus what things fall at the end of it. If you all had a goal of the percentage of students who graduated from our high schools and completed at least 2 years of post-secondary something, whether college, career, or military, if that was the goal you had, then that is your new summative, that's the new end of your cycle. In that context, high school graduation might just be in the midst of that. It might just be an output indicator, but it doesn't actually tell you the outcome. Inputs, outputs, outcomes. Inputs knowable at the beginning of the cycle, outputs knowable in the midst of the cycle, outcomes knowable at the end of the cycle. All right, now it's time to go back to your lovely sheets of paper where you have 3 columns. And what I want you to do is I want you to write 3 percentages. And the question is, reflect on the last regular meeting that y'all had. When was that?
April.
So reflect on your last regular meeting. What percentage, how long did that meeting last?
Days. We meet for a day and a half.
So how many hours did you spend? How much time did you actually spend in the meeting?
Maybe like 9?
About 9 hours? That sound about right, folks? About 9 hours? All right, so think about April, think about the 9 hours, and now what I want you to do is try to guesstimate what percentage of that time is focused on inputs, discussion of the resources and strategies that will be applied. What percent of that conversation is focused on outputs? These are the measures of what's going on in the midst of the cycle. What percentage of that time was focused on outcomes? These are measures of what school systems are creating at the end of the cycle. As you reflect on those 9 hours of your most recent meeting, what percent was focused on inputs? What percent was focused on outputs? What percent was focused on outcomes? Those three numbers together should equal 100. Go ahead and write that down now. In your 3 columns, one labeled inputs, one labeled outputs, one labeled outcomes. What percentage of your time, your most recent meeting was focused on inputs? What percent was focused on outputs? What percent was focused on outcomes? Those 3 numbers together should equal 100. Go ahead and write those numbers down now. What percentage of our time in the most recent board meeting was focused on inputs? What percent of the time was focused on outputs? What percentage of the time was focused on outcomes? We're going to write down the percentage for each of those 3. The 3 together should equal 100. Give you a few more moments to consider, and then I think this time we'll start at this end of the dais and we'll work our way across, checking in with folks. What percent was focused on inputs? What percent was focused on outputs? What percent was focused on outcomes? All right, let's start, we'll start down here, we'll come on down, and since you're just coming back, we'll pick you up last. All right. We'll just go down the row. What percentage did you put for outcomes? Not for inputs or outputs, what percentage did you put for outcomes?
25.
25?
30.
30? We'll come back to you. Yeah, we'll come back to you. So what we're putting down is we distinguish between inputs, outputs, and outcomes. And now we're writing down what percentage of the last meeting, of the 9 hours we spent in the last meeting in April, what percent of that was focused on inputs, what percent of that was focused on outputs, what percent of that was focused on outcomes. And so we've got 25, we've got 30, I think I heard 50. Yes?
20.
20? What you got?
I agree.
Let's say what?
20 is fine.
20? 20?
33.
33.
15.
15. All right, so we've got everything from 15 to 50. What you come up with?
I would say 30.
30?
30.
All right. What are some examples of things that you talked about that were focused on outcomes, that were talked about results and measurable at the end of the cycle? What are some examples of what fit into that somewhere between 15 to 50% of the time? What are some examples of things y'all talked about?
We talked about the possibility of an appeal process for English language learners who weren't passing in-course exams.
Okay. The possibility of an appeals process for our English learners who weren't passing the exams. Have you adopted that appeals process?
No.
All right. That sound, if you had said we just finished up and we've now adopted that process and we're done, it's on the books and now it's being implemented, that would feel more like an outcome. If you're still in the midst of the cycle of making that happen, it sounds more like, it sounds more like you're in the middle of that rather than at the end of that.
So maybe I thought about the question wrong because I was thinking about it from a student perspective, I guess. Like, so were we talking about outcomes for students rather than thinking about it in terms of outcomes for the
Where the students are in their cycle. So you're talking.
As
Okay.
far as the alternate graduation.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was thinking, yeah.
Gotcha. I can see that.
That's
So,
why I gave them my.
as part of that, so you all looked at graduation data, presumably, and saw, look, we got a gap here for this particular group of students. What exactly are we doing about this gap that shows up at the end of their journey?
Yeah.
Got it. Now it makes perfect sense. All right. Gotcha. Who else? What you put down is something focused on outcomes, metrics about results knowable at the end of the cycle. At least 15% of your time was focused on this, so unless that was 15% of it, is there anything else?
That's the only thing I could think of.
That's what you had as well?
To be honest, most of mine were in the input section.
I don't mean to pick on you, but you were the big roller on this one. I think you said 50.
And the very reason I said 50, because I'm thinking of outcomes, and it was such a lengthy discussion, and still is, on this graduation appeals process.
So of the 9 hours, y'all spent about 4.5 hours of your time on
It's
that?
been a lot of time spent.
All right, so
Yeah, so I.
Gotcha.
And the pathways, jump start, things, teacher summit, it was just a lot of prep of talking.
Gotcha. Outcomes is one layer of it, but there's actually another layer that I want to add on top of this that I find more important. What's the difference between student outcomes and adult outcomes? So outcomes are measures of the results knowable, the school system is created at the end of the cycle. What's the difference between student outcomes and adult outcomes?
Which adults are you talking about?
Any adults. What's the difference between student outcomes and adult outcomes?
There's a big difference. I mean, at the end of the day, the student, you look at the outcome and are you prepared for what's next, whether that's work, additional schooling, that's one. And then if you look at the adults, you can go back to accountability. It's what letter grade does your school system have? What letter grade does your school have? And that has the way of, Roche can say this, the way a lot of the promotions, contracts, things like that are written. A school letter grade has a large impact potentially on adults. And so the adults aren't the ones that are going forward to the next step necessarily, but there's different, in my opinion, there's different outcomes. Now they're intertwined because if the student succeeds, then a school system succeeds, but it's not always that way.
Other reflections, what's the difference between a student outcome and an adult outcome?
I think it depends on the context in which you're discussing, or which we're discussing this. We're looking at student outcomes within our accountability system, if we're looking at student outcomes in terms of how they're progressing emotionally, socially, behaviorally. I mean, there are many, many different student outcomes that we're looking at, and for quantifying an adult outcome that we would be interested in the educational arena is what are the adults doing to help that student outcome? What are the outcomes we're seeing in the adults that are furthering those student outcomes?
Yeah, I think if you put these two answers together, I think y'all get at the heart of it, is that student outcomes are about what are measures at the end of the cycle that students know and are able to do. And the adult outcomes, basically everything that's not the school system creates, it's not a student outcome, but they're really descriptive of what are the adults, what have they done, and what's the result of their handiwork at the end of the cycle. And so we have this distinction. We have student outcomes. These are measures knowable at the end of the cycle of what students know and are able to do. Of what students know and are able to do. And adult outcomes, to simplify, is any outcome the school systems create, it's not a student outcome, is by definition an adult outcome. So there's what are the students, what are things that are demonstrations of what students know and are able to do? What are things that, generally speaking, are more demonstrations of what the adults know and are able to do? What's an example of an adult outcome in a school system? What's an example of an outcome the school system creates that's not a student outcome?
Evaluation of teachers.
Teacher retention, evaluation of teachers. So at the end of the year, somebody's going to evaluate the teachers, and the teacher has, their evaluation says whatever it says, and that is a measure of what is it that an adult knows and able to do is no matter what that measure is, no matter what we say the measure of this teacher is, that doesn't actually tell us what students know and are able to do. That's a separate measure. Adult outcomes are separate from student outcomes. Certainly influential, but these are two different things. We've got student outcomes, what are measures at the end of the cycle of what our students know and are able to do. And adult outcomes, what are all the other metrics, the things that aren't descriptive of what our students know and are able to do. What's another example of an adult outcome in the school system I create?
A sense of accomplishment.
A sense of accomplishment. Actually, I would strongly go with that. Is that it doesn't describe what students know or are able to do. That to me sounds like it's more descriptive of what is the environment that adults have created for students to learn in. Other examples of adult outcomes in the school system. What other measures of what the adults know and are able to do in the school system?
Effective management of resources.
Yeah, budgets, facilities, books, buses, all of those things. Those are adult outcomes. They don't describe, unless your CFO is an 8th grader, your budget is not a student outcome. It's not descriptive of what students know are able to do. Adults put those things together. Yeah, what are examples of student outcomes in a school system? What are examples at the end of the cycle, measures of what students know are able to do?
Things that they create or credentials that they earn.
Certainly. At the end of the cycle, we could look at, here are the things, we got a rubric and it says, did you create these things effectively or not? And we could look at that as an outcome, or there could be some type of industry-based certification, and if they earned it, they didn't. At the end of the cycle, we see how many IBCs they got. Yeah, other examples of student outcomes. Evidence of what students know and are able to do at the end of the cycle.
Their GPA, their average GPA?
Could be. I've had some people argue that before. But yeah, definitely could be, depending on how rigorous your grading system is. The challenge there is, does this high school algebra teacher score the same way for the same quiz as this high school algebra teacher? And to the extent that that's not the case, then it seems a little bit harder to make that assessment. But if there's pretty good norms of expectations across all the algebra teachers, then it starts to look a lot more like a student outcome, yeah.
The scholarships students earn.
The scholarships typically have some type of requirements, and either students submit the requirements or they haven't. It could be, depending on how rigorous the scholarship requirements are, it definitely be a measure that students know and are able to do. If it, is a scholarship given out to every single kid, that seems like less of a student outcome and more of the generosity of the community. But if there's some rigorous expectations of what students know and are able to do that are connected to having earned it, then absolutely, that could be. Why is this distinction between student outcome and adult outcome important? Why am I bringing this up?
Because it's really easy to get focused on the adult stuff and lose sight of the students.
Yeah, it is incredibly easy to get so wound around the axle about the adult stuff that we don't pull back to check, well, wait a minute, did this actually move the needle on what students know and are able to do? Like, there could be some stuff that's real, I can think of my school district, some stuff that's real popular, mighty popular. The adults love it, but that doesn't mean it's actually making the difference for students that we expect it to make. Yeah, why is it important that members of a governing body be able to distinguish between student outcomes and adult outcomes? Why is it absolutely essential? Why is it that you are almost certain to fail the children under your charge if you can't distinguish between student outcomes and adult outcomes?
Not to lose focus.
This is a lot about focus. School systems don't exist to improve adult outcomes. School systems do not exist to improve adult outcomes. That's not why school systems exist. School systems exist for one reason and one reason only. It's to improve student outcomes. It's to cause improvements in what our students know and are able to do. Now, we may have some differences of agreement on why we want them to know and be able to do something, or what specific competencies we want them to know and be able to do. We may definitely have differences on how we get there. But at the core of it all, school systems exist for one reason and one reason only. It's to improve student outcomes. It's to cause improvements in what our students know and are able to do. And if we will not accomplish that, we have in fact failed. And people get all hot and bothered about being clear about have we succeeded or failed. Effective governance, you must get clear about are we succeeding or failing. Just because that's uncomfortable for you is not a reason to avoid the conversation. Children's well-being hangs in the balance of your willingness to be honest about the effect that you're having. The measure of whether a school system is succeeding or failing does not live in adult outcomes. It lives in student outcomes, because that's why school systems exist. Any other reflections? Why is it absolutely crucial to be able to distinguish between student outcomes and adult outcomes? Any other thoughts on this before we transition? Why is it absolutely essential that each of you must be able to distinguish between, is this a student outcome, a measure of what students know and are able to do, or an adult outcome, something about what adults know and are able to do? Why is it absolutely essential that you can distinguish between those two for you to be effective on this body? Any other reflections before we transition?
I would just say part of it, right, is because it's about causal inference, and so what we want are changes in the adult outcomes to be linked to those student betterment, right?
No
and
doubt.
so that we have to be able to distinguish so that we know as we switch levers with adult outcomes, what kind of impact they're having on student outcomes. Because if they're not affecting student outcomes, we should just not even bother with them, right?
Yeah, if the reason the school system exists is to improve student outcomes, and we're doing something, we have no way of knowing, we haven't tracked, or the data doesn't exist, and we haven't put in the work to figure it out, whether or not the thing that adults are doing that adults like is actually making a difference for students. This is a governance, a classic area of governance fail. That we have to be able to link, what are the adults doing? Is it actually providing value for our students? Is it actually causing improvements or creating the context for improvements in what they know we're able to do? And if we can't connect those dots, then we need to think awful hard, is this the right deployment of taxpayer dollars? Is this the right deployment? Yeah, any other reflections before we transition? Why is it absolutely essential to be able to distinguish between adult outcomes and student outcomes? Then it's time for you to distinguish between adult outcomes and student outcomes. So on your paper, you have 3 columns. The third column is labeled outcomes. So go ahead and in the outcomes column, bisect that column, and now one half of that column label adult outcomes, and the other half of that column label student outcomes. And now what I want you to do is, for the last meeting, of the percentage of time that you wrote down as outcomes, now you want to think to yourself, how much of that time spent on outcomes was about what students know are able to do, and how much of that time spent on outcomes was about something else? So how much of the time was focused on student outcomes, how much of the time was focused on adult outcomes? So you put down a percentage, somewhere between 15, and 50% of the time that you indicate is focused on outcomes. Now you want to bifurcate that. How much of the time focused on outcomes was focused on student outcomes versus how much of the time focused on outcomes was something else? And by the way, those two numbers together should equal 100. So you think of what percentage of the outcomes time was adults, what percentage of the outcome time was students, those two numbers should equal 100. So was it 50-50, was it 80-20, was it 70-30? Of the time focused on outcomes, what percent of that time was focused on student outcomes?
We gotta try to remember what we talked about.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of a challenge. You gotta take a moment to think it through.
Yeah, pull it in the agenda. So much.
While I mentioned that, while you all are thinking about that, trying to come up with what percentage of time was student outcomes, what percentage of time was adult outcomes. My colleague has joined me, Michelle Simmons, flown in from Atlanta to be with us today to support y'all as well. What percentage of your time was focused on student outcomes? What percentage of your time was focused on adult outcomes?
Can I get her name again? I didn't hear.
Michelle Simmons.
Michelle? Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, many of you spoke with Michelle. This is the Michelle. What percentage of your time was focused on adult outcomes? What percentage of your time was focused on student outcomes? And last time, we started on this end, so we will switch again, and this time we'll start on this end, and we'll work our way back this way. And what you want to do, now that you've got a percentage identified of how much of it was student outcomes, how much of it was adult outcomes, then you want to do the quick math to figure out what percentage of your time together in April was focused on student outcomes. So if you said that we spent 30% of our time on outcomes, and you think it was 50-50 between student outcomes and adult outcomes, that means you spent how much time on student outcomes? 15. And so you want to do the math right quick to figure out what percentage of our time is focused on student outcomes. That's the percentage I'm going to start over here, and we're going to make our way down. We will try to drill into what percent of our time is focused on student outcomes. So we talked about what percent of our time is on inputs, what percent of our time is on outputs, what percent of our time is on outcomes. Now we're breaking that into two different groups, what percentage was student outcomes, what percentage was adult outcomes. And once you've got that sorted, then we should be able to identify what percent of the time do I think we focus on student outcomes during our April, the 9 hours we spent together in April. All right, so give folks a little bit of time to do the quick math on this thing. And then we'll start and we'll just work our way down. What percentage of time in April was focused on student outcomes?
I can't really go over the particular topics that we talked about, but I'll speak broadly that I think that.
Do you need a little bit more time to think about it?
Well, I need an agenda, like Sandy said, where I can tell you exactly what we talked about on a particular topic. But I don't know that would necessarily change my answer.
Yeah, generally speaking, having done this a few times, it's probably not. Normally speaking, we're looking for kind of your general sense of it. And so as you think about the percentage of time, it was inputs, outputs, and outcomes. And then that percentage that was outcomes, if you broke that down in adult outcomes and student outcomes, what percentage of the time would you guess was focused on student outcomes of that 9 hours?
Yeah, I think in fact it may be similar to what we're going to talk about tomorrow. I think that the focus ends up being about maybe 70% on student outcomes. I could drill down a little bit more, but I think you make a valid point about adult behavior and how that impacts it. And there's a lot of adult conversation that goes on, and I see your point about the importance of adult behavior as well as adult outcomes impacting.
Well, so let's take an example right quick. One of the examples you gave from the last meeting was that we talked about what what type of policy framework should we have in place for our English language learners? Did I hear that part correctly? So, discussion about the policy that we should put in place around graduation for English language learners. Is that a discussion about what the students are doing, or is it a discussion about what the adults are doing?
I think it's both. I certainly, in terms of outcomes, we're looking at, well, what is it that students are achieving? How we measure that? Are they really accomplishing the things that we want? But I think it's certainly intermingled in all of that is adult outcomes, because adults are also being measured by the success of their students. So that's certainly tied to it. For that particular issue, I promise you that individual schools are looking at it. I think that districts are looking at it. There was an intense focus on the students themselves, but I think underneath that is also how well did that school do in terms of successfully graduating that student or that group of students or other students. So I don't know that that's, because of the accountability system that we have put in place, we're tracking student outcomes, and I think by extension also tracking adult behavior and adult outcomes.
All right, so I think the percentage you said that was focused in April on student outcomes was 70%?
Yeah, and now that I remember the topic, I still believe that's still true in my opinion.
All right, we'll go on down the road. All right, so we've got one percentage. We're going to go on down the road, get everybody else's percentage, then we'll come back and talk about it. All right, what percentage do you come up with?
Well, I said 15% on outcomes. Of that 15%, 90% of that was on student outcomes, 10% on adult outcomes. So 90%, 15%.
Gotcha, so 13.5%? Gotcha. So 13.5% of the time is focused on student outcomes. Got it. Yeah, what's going on?
70-30, 70 students, 30 adults.
And what was your percentage for outcomes overall?
Yeah,
So when you said inputs, outputs, and outcomes, what percent did you put for outcomes?
I didn't do it like that. I did student outcomes and adult outcomes. I did two.
So of the time spent on outcomes, you're saying it was 70-30. But when I'm trying to figure out, okay, so how much of your time did you spend on outcomes?
What did you answer to the last question? 30.
Oh, it was 30. Gotcha. So you've got a 70-30 split. Okay, got it. Well, what'd you come up with?
80% of 20, so I'm on 16.
16% of the time?
5.
A total of 5% of the time was focused on student outcomes? So what?
I was gonna say 30, but
You said 70% was
I had
focused on
50%
student outcomes?
on outcomes.
So you said 50% on outcomes, and of that 70% was student outcomes?
Yes.
Got it.
I had 30% on outcome and then 50-50, so it would be 50.
Gotcha.
Just in full disclosure, I wasn't here, so I'm guessing, based on the agenda.
Yeah.
At 15%, so I did 50-50 and my original was 30, so I guess my signature was 15%.
Gotcha.
I had 25% on outcomes, and I had it broken down 80% student, 20% adult.
Got it.
20%.
20%.
I broke it down 70-30. 70% on student outcomes.
And what was your original number? For
I
outcomes?
was on the phone when we were doing the original numbers.
Gotcha. I think you said 30%.
50.
So you're saying 70% of 30?
Yes, that's the way it would add out. I
Okay.
don't think I did the percentage on inputs, outputs, and outcomes.
Oh, okay. Because you accept, got it. So we have a astounding range from 5% to 70% What are you noticing as with where we are in the conversation so far? What's coming up for you? What are you noticing so far in this conversation?
Very inconsistent.
Say what?
Inconsistent.
Inconsistency? What are you noticing? Or what's coming up for you as you're thinking about this whole conversation we're having so far today? Like there's a reason I'm inviting you into this conversation. So I invite you to just reflect on why are we having this conversation? What's this all about? And then inside of that, what are you noticing? What's coming up for you? Yeah, this is about focus. Yeah, what are you noticing? What's coming up for you so far in this conversation? Just your general reflections, and I will do some cold calling just to pull people into the conversation. Before we get to that, who else? What are you noticing so far in this conversation? What's coming up for you?
Is thinking about how we're spending our time, and then clarity around how that time is spent, right? Like categorizing it, and then going back to, is this really about students? Is it really about, will it really lead to the outcomes we want for students?
Yeah. Why are we having this conversation? Who else? What's coming up for you?
Because if we're saying that our main purpose is to improve student outcomes, we obviously should be spending the majority of our time on that.
That would certainly be our coaching.
I'm sorry.
That would certainly be our coaching.
Right. And if any of our numbers are correct, because probably most of us can't even remember what we did in April at the meeting, but it looks like from what we're saying is we're not spending the majority of our time on the major focus that we should be having.
Yeah. What's coming up for you? Why are we having this conversation? What do you think?
I think it's a lot of confusion and that we're not really focusing. We say we're focusing on student outcome, but I don't know if we really are. It appears from time we did, and as I look at your statement about changing adult behaviors, I think that's an area that we don't focus on as much as we should, and I think that drives a lot of what happens with students within the school.
You have surmised it accurately. Yeah, why are we having this conversation? What's coming up for you so far? Who else we share?
I mean, just, we did have student outcome conversations.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have not landed anywhere, so I think that we spent a lot of time on some discussion, but the outcome piece is still not clear. So I don't know if we can actually label that as a student outcome, the last meeting. I think we did spend a good amount of time on it. So I think that we recognize that our students should be our priority in the focus in these conversations, but maybe that's not how we spent the majority of our time. We got focused on the adult parts.
And I'm not, in no time will we share any of your comments from the interviews, like that's for us to know and you not to know. But we will share themes, and that was certainly thematic. That as much as there was a common theme that this board interacts with the members of the body in a very professional way, and people get along well, and there's just not these signs of discord. Like there are state boards where there is yelling and screaming and people using language not appropriate in school, and folks storming out, and just all manner of behavior that I would describe as discordant. And I don't see that being typical of y'all. Maybe I just missed that meeting, but the what I'm saying that's not descriptive of that. But what I would invite you to distinguish is between the idea of a professionally behaving board and an effectively behaving board. What do you think I might consider the difference between a professionally behaving board and an effectively behaving board? Because this ties into exactly what you just said. What do you think might be the difference between professional behavior and effective behavior? Because these are not the same.
Focus.
The difference is focus. Is that effective boards actually focus and get something done? It is possible that you could speak in a very professional manner and be highly ineffective. It's possible to be professionally ineffective. In fact, I would go so far to say, in my experience, I would rather you be yelling and screaming at each other about the things that matter most than speaking in dulcet tones about things that aren't going to drive performance for students. I would actually rather you be unprofessionally effective than professionally ineffective. Now, if I could have my brothers, I'd love to see a professional effective board. But this is one of the things that came up, is there feels like there's oftentimes we have conversations, but we never actually land somewhere, is something that was mentioned by multiple folks during the interviews. This idea of, we're certainly behaving in a way that positions us to be effective, but that's not the same thing as us actually being effective. Now, one thing I would say that I saw today that made my little data nerd heart happy was that that epic presentation y'all got right before I stepped up here. Like, that really puts at your fingertips the ability to have a lot more focus in your conversations. I'll give you a warning. It also puts at your fingertips the ability to chase a lot of rabbits. Whether or not you use that as a way to focus or whether you use that as a way to be diffuse, it is a powerful tool for focus if used that way. But it could also be a powerful distraction. Folks, run down some paths that just aren't aligned to what y'all said y'all are trying to get done. And so this conversation is very much about focus. Why are we having this conversation? We've been talking about inputs, outputs, outcomes, student outcomes, adult outcomes, talk about how you all spend your time. Why are we having this conversation?
Help us focus better.
Yeah.
I would guess.
Yeah.
Or help us think about that issue so that we could possibly focus better.
This is the same thing that you want for your teachers. You want your teachers to be reflective of their practice. You want them to think back on how have I performed as an access to me being a more effective teacher, that I can perform at a higher level tomorrow. Not that there's anything wrong with what I did today, but there's just always that continuous improvement, that little bit better, that little bit better. This conversation is an invitation into the same continuous improvement practices that you would want for your teachers. Or, as I would say it more directly, lead by example. If you want your teachers to have this vision for their lives and constantly getting a little bit better, your access to creating a culture that starts in this room. How do we get a little bit better, a little bit better? How do we get a little more focused, a little more focused? Any other reflections before we transition? Other reflections on why are we having this conversation? Why does any of this matter? Any other reflections before we transition? Yeah.
In your observation, have you surmised that we have been less than focused on student outcomes as a board?
You all have surmised that you've been less than focused on student outcomes. It is less useful for me to opine on your performance and much more useful for you to opine on your performance, which is why I didn't come in here and tell you, hey, we actually watched your meetings, which we did, and we actually started tracking what percentage of time was focused on student outcomes, which we did. But it's actually not particularly useful information for us to just regurgitate to you. What's actually far more useful in driving change in adult behavior is for you to reflect on your own practice and arrive at your own conclusions about to what degree is that behavior aligned or not aligned with our intentions. This is what drives performance improvements. So the principal barging into the room and saying, hey, you should do this, 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 and this is not nearly as valuable as a observation feedback tool. As a principal, say, hey, what is it we're trying to work on? What are you trying to get a little bit better at this week? All right, I'm gonna swing by, we're gonna check it out, offer you some feedback, maybe do some modeling, and then afterwards we'll talk about it. Like that's how you get a little bit stronger. My role, the role of the work that we do is to support you from a coaching perspective. It's not ever going to be our job to tell you what you need to do next. It's going to be our job to solicit from you what you think you should do next, and then to support you on your journey in that direction. And that will be obvious in the presentation we provide a little bit later. What are some of the larger themes that you all said that are important to y'all? What are the things that are really already kind of working the way you expect them to work? And then what are some things where it sounds like there may be a consensus around to continue on, and things where you have some real decisions as a body of, is this an area that we want to lean into to grow our own performance? Other reflections on the conversation we're having so far before we transition. Other reflections before we transition.
I appreciate the shared perspectives of my colleagues.
Yeah, I appreciate the folks that are open. I have worked with some state boards, things a little bit more closed down. Folks were less open to sharing. I would call on folks and they kind of, get a little bit persnickety with me, but as I've picked on y'all kind of rolled with it, so I appreciate your indulgence. Any other reflection before we transition? Then before we go on to the next step of this, what I want to do, two things. I want to take a quick break so people can get up, stretch, get some blood moving. We've been in this conversation for a little bit, so I want to be mindful of that. It is currently 10 after. I'd like to get, it is 5 after. Is that enough time for a stretch break for folks? Or do you need 20 after? 15 is 15 after work, or do you need 20 after?
That works.
15 works? All right, so let's be back. My request is to be back, ready to go at 15 after. When we come back, here's the question. What is something that I could do differently that could help drive the focus of the board? See you in 5 minutes.
I got my dad over the refrigerator yesterday. They're like, oh, they only chocolate with protein and peanut butter. I'm just protein.
Yes, it's great.
I can't do anything. I just come prepared with a jacket. I just come with a jacket every time.
That's why I don't wear dresses up here. If my legs were out, I would be like freezing. I can't wear it.
Oh my God. So I have a picture of my list of classmates and my teachers. That we used to ride bus. Well, we used to ride planes.
Yeah, oh, this is that.
And so I'm reading it, which is cool, way back. There it is. How do people do this? I mixed the
Hey, 30-minute break.
I'm gonna go, I'm oatmeal, peanut butter, chocolate chip, protein powder, and all mixed together.
You're on time. Good job, Tommy. Tommy's on time.
I heard the speaker.
I knew they wouldn't be back.
I see that.
Oh, my goodness. All right, so where we left off was a conversation about what is the degree of focus that the board exhibits. And without inviting you to share your answer to question number 3, you all remember question number 3?
As a member of their body, where am I?
How focused am I between 0 and 10? So I will not ask you your answer to that question, but reflect on that, because that is the question that we moved on. So so far all this time has been spent on questions number 1 and 2. We're just now making our way to question number 3. And so with question number 3 is the context.
Okay.
What is something that I could do to support an increased focus on the part of the board? What's something I could do to support an increased focus on the part of the board? As you've been reflecting on this whole conversation we've been having this entire time, now as you begin to really think through the adult behavior we've experienced and what results that's produced, now if you had to reflect and think, what is one tangible step I could take to help support an increased focus on the part of the board? Who would be the first to share? Okay, I'll let you finish chewing and then we'll come back to you. What is something I could do to improve the board's focus on student outcomes?
So we've sort of talked about this over the years, kind of what are our big rocks?
Yeah.
And it'd be great, because I think the department has worked really hard to keep steering us in a direction, and we talked about it. But if we could just find a way, if we said, here are our big rocks, maybe I could lead that.
Yeah.
And then they're just like in the room. So that there's certain schools, universities, organizations where they're big rocks that they focus on as an organization. They're plastered everywhere. So if you ask anybody within the organization, I went and visited American University, not American, it was Arizona State, but a university that everywhere we went on the campus was
Everywhere.
And so there was no way that you worked at that organization or had any affiliation, and you couldn't answer the question, what are our big rocks?
Yeah, so what I hear you saying, as a board member, I could push for us to get really clear about what our big rocks are, and then push for us to have those someplace, like if you, the district where I work at, if you come and look at our boardroom, the big rocks are clearly on the wall, along with kind of the data that describes how we're doing. Fortunately, it's been an upward trajectory of late. That's helpful. If you asked every single member of my board what the big rocks are, I would bet money that all 7 of them would tell you the exact same thing. I bet money on it. First of all, they'd be able to tell you, well, here's exactly how many of them they are, and here's exactly what number 1 is, and exactly what number 2 is, and exactly what number 3 is, and here's exactly what number 4 is. I bet money all 7 of them could do it. If you randomly put them on speakerphone right now, call them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that includes the 2 members who just got on last month. There's a difference that it makes when the governing body is crystal clear about what the big rocks are. What I hear you saying is, as a member of the body, I can push for that. I can push for us having and living inside of that degree of clarity. Thank you for being the first one. Yeah.
Add something. The point of this retreat is, and also an acknowledgement that this board is going to change pretty significantly next year.
Yeah.
And so the work that we're doing is helpful for us, but as Dr. Brophy, our president, has reminded us, is that this is sort of to help frame and build a foundation for the next board to build off of. So if we were to establish those big rocks and put them somewhere where everyone could articulate them. The next board could come along and say, look, they've got 3 big rocks. We like those big rocks, or we don't like those big rocks. We want to swap out one of them. But now we know that every time we have one of these meetings and one of these big powwow discussions on a topic, someone could point to it and say, let's focus. Does that help us with rock number 1, 2, or 3? And if not, then why are we doing this? There might be a legitimate reason for it, but just in terms of helping us stay focused as an organization.
This is a keen insight, and it's actually one of the themes that came up in the interviews as well, which was, hey, you know this thing's about to flip, right? And there's people leaving, people coming, it's going to be a whole different crew. And our response pretty much every time was, all right, great, so what are you doing to create the context for the future incarnation of the board to be wildly successful? Or will they inherit your lack of focus? Or will they inherit your focus? So said differently, the more focused that I work to be as a board member today, and the more focused that I work as a board member to cause our body to be today, actually has repercussions for the next body. I think you are absolutely correct. The more focus that this version of the body demonstrates, the more focus the next version of the body is likely to demonstrate in response. I think that is absolutely correct. That one of the key obligations that you now have inside of service to the students to whom you are accountable is setting up the next incarnation of the board to be wildly successful at focusing on improving student outcomes. Who else? What is something I could do? Again, we're grounding this conversation in your response to question number 3. If I had to score myself on a 0 to 10, how focused am I on the reason school systems exist? I'm not asking you the number, though. If anybody wants to, share, you're welcome to do so. But what I am asking is, grounded in that, reflecting the previous conversation, what is one tangible step? What's the one tangible action I could take right here, right now, today, next week, the week after, that could help increase the board's focus on student outcomes? Who will be the next to share?
Yeah, I believe that what the president has said is very in line to asking you to show us the big picture of what are those big rocks? What does this look like in the state? If we can't remember what April's agenda was about, how can we even communicate to the state about what are the big rocks? Where are we heading? What are the outcomes? And the continuity of what we have here, that we're so engaged and wanting the best for our students, the continuity of moving into our new year, new board.
Now, this big rocks theory sounds real cute on paper.
Yeah.
But there are some significant costs to a governing body being focused on a set of big rocks. What are examples of the costs of the board being more focused? We've talked about it like it's a good thing, but I want to be clear with you as a covering elected official. I assure you I'm keenly aware of the cost of the governing body focusing. What are some of the costs of focusing? Why is it that so many governing bodies choose not to be focused? What's the cost of focusing?
Time together. And I think it's also, we're gonna have to give something up. So there's something we're doing, or a number of things we're doing that we won't be able to do anymore for the sake of the focus.
This is the key cost of focusing. The very discussion of saying we'll be focused in on this narrower set of things means that there are things that fall outside the field of focus. And everybody's got the 3 or 4 or 5 things that you would love for us to focus on. And the moment that I have to give up one of my things, then I want to be focused as long as what you want to be focused on is what I'm already wanting to be focused on. The moment you want to be focused on something that's not what I want to be focused on.
And then does it become the adult behavior?
Then we don't do that. And instead, we run a lot of different directions. Children suffer from our lack of discipline, our lack of focus. Yeah. What is something specific, something tangible I, as a board member, could do to help support the board's improvement in focusing on student outcomes? Who will be the next to share?
I think agenda creation,
Yeah.
how we build out our agendas matter.
Yeah, I could be more intentional about agenda creation and how we build out the agenda and say, okay, well, wait a minute, we want to focus, to your point, at least half of our time and on the student outcomes that we say are most important. How are we building an agenda that honors that lifts that up? Is that a criteria for the agenda making? Well, okay, if it's not, then what can we do to cause that to be the new criteria for agenda making? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a perfect example. Who'll be the next to share? What's something that I could do as a board member to help support the board and be more focused on student outcomes? Who'll be the next to
Just
share?
a conversation on the big rock, but one of my earlier comments was specific to priorities. And it's great to have an agenda, but if you don't prioritize the items on the agenda, if you don't prioritize your work items so that they make the agenda, then I don't know that you're going to progress, and I don't know that you're going to have the desired focus. So I go back again to priorities, and as you said, the diverse interests of the board, which is natural, common, and I think healthy. But then the challenging part is how do you achieve the focus that you're looking for by getting alignment on what your priorities are.
So the comment, I think, is absolutely spot on. What I was listening for is, what's an action you could take to help move the board in that direction?
Yeah, so for me, I think that clarification with regard to strategic plan for the board itself. And within that strategic plan, you would identify actionable items and then prioritize them.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I could push for us to be clear about what are the priority action items within the strategic plan. Because I'm seeing a strategic plan, but in visiting with y'all, I'm not clear that everybody's looking at the same stuff. But don't worry, we'll figure that out here in a minute. Anybody else? What's something I can do? What's something I as a board member could do to help support the board being more focused on improving student outcomes? Who'll be the next to share? What's something I can do? Yeah.
And just thinking back to something that Ashley talked about in terms of like trust, right? And so trying to remind myself as I'm thinking about something, if I'm evaluating the policy decision, that I ought to be asking, is this best for kids? And that I have to believe that even when my fellow board members disagree with me, that they are also asking themselves that same question, right? Is this best for kids? And so trying to build trust as we focus in on what can be really, because a lot of times the big rocks that we have to focus on can be contentious as well. And so I think that that level of prioritizing what's best for students and like believing that my fellow board members have that at the forefront of their mind too is important.
Yeah, actually for y'all, that shouldn't be too hard. We've done this exercise and we've interviewed everybody, and folks have been on some wild topics that had to do with student outcomes. Generally speaking, you all were pretty tightly circling around, orbiting the same general set of ideas, which I think is something was observed earlier. And that is something special in and of itself. And so I would just submit to you, having gone through the interview process with y'all, I don't find it hard. I think it would be very easy for any of you to arrive at the conclusion. We may in fact disagree on the how, but we're all kind of aligned in what we're wanting to see possible for children in the state. Because that I would say that is a fair description. Like, it's not universal and it's not a really tight alignment. I'm not trying to pretend that it is. But you all are here. Your chance to benefit children comes when you are here. But a lot of boards we work with are here. And so I think it is a very easy thing for you all to, as an act of faith, say, you know what? Every single person on this board, they only got one interest. They want to see great things for the kids across the state. And I think you would be accurate if you made that assumption. I think you could stand on that assumption. Every single person on this board, what they really want, they want to see great things for kids. That's what our interviews would suggest. That is necessary, but insufficient. Absolutely necessary for a highly effective team, for you all to have that sense of, you know what, I know that these folks want something great for students. Now our job is to figure out how to meet each other partway, meet somewhere in the middle, you know, where our collective understanding of our collective constituencies comes into a place of confluence. That's the hard part. But at least starting from that point of I can start from the assumption of best assumption, start from a position of best assumptions. Not every board would I tell them that's a good place to stand, because that seems to be my listening as well. That is something I can say to y'all, and then that's a beautiful place to be. Because you may take that for granted. Not everybody has what you have in that regard. But what's one tangible thing I can do? Yeah.
I come from a different perspective because I'm the non-public member on the board.
Yep.
And I'm from the Catholic system. I can, as I do all the time, support the wonderful efforts that this board and this superintendent has worked in the area of literacy, in the area of, having kids to read better.
Yeah.
And I can take that message to my colleagues in the Catholic system with showing, and not only that, but using some of our state officials to assist and to drive that for students across the state. Because when I talk to the superintendent, he's the superintendent of every child in this state.
Right.
You're in Catholic school,
Every single
public
child.
school. So I can do that as a member of this board, even though I represent the non-public side of the house.
Yeah. Well, and as you do that, know that if there was one area of student outcomes that there was a clear consensus across the board on, it was absolutely that one. The primacy of literacy. If folks want their children to have access to all that this world has to offer and all the knowledge that this world has to offer, and the sense that, and understanding that the key access to that is literacy. That if our children can't read, that it may be limited in ways that we don't desire for them. And so if there's anything you can rely on, that there was a strong consensus across the full body on, it was a sense that we know that literacy has to be a gift that we provide all of our children. Anyone else? Before we transition, something specific that I can do, a difference that I specifically can make. Or, now that we've leaned into this conversation, what are you noticing as you are comparing the numbers you wrote down for how focused the board, how focused am I? What are you noticing as you compare those numbers with the numbers you came up with for how focused was the board in this April meeting? Because if you look at the numbers that I wrote down for how focused am I, and I look at the numbers for how focused was the board at the most recent board meeting, what are you noticing? And maybe make that a nice thing. Because you look at the percentage that I wrote down for the April board meeting, whatever percentage you wrote down is somewhere between 5% and 70%, but most of y'all were roughly in the 15% or so range. As you look at that score, the percentage of time focused on student outcomes, and you look at what you wrote down for how focused am I on the reason for which school systems exist, what are you noticing? As you compare those two things, what are you noticing?
We could put more focus on.
I'm making a nice statement.
Oh, well, yeah. I don't believe that, putting enough focus in February on the students as opposed to what I think overall, I rated myself.
Yeah, I would like to really match the rating I gave myself. I'd like to see myself focus more on student outcomes than we did at the February and April meetings. Yeah, it's this powerful moment. You think about it, after the game, win or lose the game, the effective coach goes back and replays the video, right? Whether you lost the game or you won the game, the effective coach goes back and replays the video. Why does the coach do this? It's about improvement. Why does the coach go back and replay the video?
See the strengths, weaknesses.
Yeah, see the strengths and weaknesses. That is, I'm inviting you into this conversation the same way any effective coach would. To just look, take an honest gander at, hey, you know what, where are the opportunities to grow? And if that's too scary for you to do here, then that's fine, but just understand that the culture you create here in the boardroom echoes across the classrooms across the state. Like the more that we have a open and candid conversation about, hey, what are the opportunities for my own growth, my own development? What are the ways that I can help stand in greatness on behalf of the students that we serve? Like the more that I'm willing to do that here in this public board meeting, the more that I create a safe space for that to be how adult behavior is normed across the state. And so that's the invitation. It's like any effective coach replays the video. Now's your opportunity to replay the video of your own education leadership. As I look at the percentage of time the board's focused on student outcomes, I look at the number I gave myself for how focused am I on student outcomes. What do you notice? Make it a nice statement. Who'll be the next to share? By the way, thank you for going first and responding to that question.
You used a different word that time, I haven't heard yet, you used the word growth.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've been saying improvement. I should stick with, what are the things that I can do to help the board improve its focus on student outcomes?
Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do is focus right now. I'm trying to understand what you're looking for. Are you looking for focus,
Yeah.
or are you looking for growth?
So you all have described this quantity of focus. And what I'm asking is, what could I do as an individual board member to grow the quantity of focus that the board is bringing to bear during these meetings? So you all have shown, we focus, for whatever amount, we focus this much. We want to focus this much. What could I as an individual board member do to help grow from this amount of focus to this amount of focus? That's the inquiry. And so as you're reflecting on the percentage of time that the board is focusing in its February, April meetings, and you look at the rating I gave myself for how focused am I on the reason for which school systems exist, and what are you noticing? Make it a nice statement. Who else? As I compare the board's performance with my assessment of my performance, what am I noticing? Make it a nice statement. Who will be the next to share?
I'll go.
Yeah.
Awkward silence makes me uncomfortable. So, the teacher talks was working there. So I guess the I statement I would make is, we talked a lot about the what, we all share that vision, but the how is where we have challenges. And so sometimes being a better listener, I can listen more, I can communicate better to understand how others want to achieve maybe the same goals and just understand their why.
Yeah, I can actively take time to just be a better listener of what is in the hearts of others, and what is their why, and is there a path, a shared path toward how? Yeah, absolutely. I think that is probably one of the more powerful things that an individual board member could do.
And along those same lines, I think personally then, trying to work more to be more involved in consensus building.
Yeah.
In terms of, trying to find that sweet spot or that compromise, or what we can encompass as we look to these outcomes, that gives everyone a sense of, we're working toward the same end. We can get those hows a little bit closer together, and then we can agree that for the greater good, this pathway we can all live with.
Yeah.
And maybe becoming more active in doing that.
Yeah.
Rather than everyone go to your corners and, it's an interview this way.
Let's see how it turns out. No, I love this reflection, as a member of the body, as I replay the video of my leadership like any effective coach would, I'm looking and noticing that there are opportunities for me to be a more active participant in consensus building and helping us find our way to a common why. That could really help us. That could really help us get less time spent there, more time focused on, okay, how are we now that we've got that, how do we monitor implementation, and how do we do the other continuous improvement activities to drive the organization? Yeah. I absolutely appreciate that. Who will be the next to share?
I can ask more student-focused questions and also more, like, have a stronger bar for the evidence in terms of is there evidence to indicate that this will lead to the outcomes that we want for kids?
So I really appreciate both of these. Let's make sure that I'm going to send them both our rubric for question asking and our rubric for research analysis. So we have tools for both of those things. So I love that you mentioned both of those things. We have one tool that you can use that can really help you evaluate what is the degree of focus of the questions that I'm asking. And we often do this for boards. If they ask us, we'll watch the board meeting and then we'll score every question. And then we can go board member by board. All right, you were 30% focused. You were 15% focused. You were 70% focused this time, sir. Well done. This is your highest score yet. Keep it coming. We know there's more in you. I see an 80 in your future. And we'll go down the road and we'll work with people to just grow the strength and focus of the questions they ask. Because the challenge is, the more focused your inquiry is as a body, the more you challenge the superintendent to be focused as well. If the superintendent has to chase y'all this direction and chase questions that direction, the superintendent has less ability to be focused because the superintendent does need to be responsive to the questions you ask. So if your questions are like this, then the superintendent's attention is like this. If your questions are like this, then the superintendent's attention could be like this as well. And it's a really, so that we actually have a rubric for that. Again, we can evaluate every single question you ask during the board meeting, and then we can give you a score at the end of it to talk about exactly how focused were the questions that I asked on the things that I say matter most. And then the second thing you mentioned is that I can be a little more rigorous about what is the quality of evidence to bring us. So for that, not surprisingly, we have a tool for that as well. For people who are not researchers, on ways that you could look at a body of research, know kind of what questions you need to ask to get the relevant information, and then be able to score. Is this trustworthy? Should we build our house on this particular foundation? Or is this not trustworthy? And we give you some tangible examples in the tool to help calibrate your understanding of how to evaluate research. We give you some examples of some highly validated research. Everybody's like, this really meets the high bar. And we give you some examples of some that have been completely debunked and should have never been considered legitimate from the beginning. But I think to the layperson, they probably sound equally credible. And so without some tool to help you differentiate between which of these should we build a house on and which of these will cause our house to blow away, it's hard to know. And so we'll provide you that tool as well. I absolutely appreciate that. Who else? As I look at the board's performance as I've assessed it, and what I've put down for my my degree of focus, what are you noticing? Make it a nice statement. Who will be the next this year? The next to share.
All right, I broke the last awkward silence. Who's up?
Rephrase the question.
Yeah. The invitation here is that you've now identified for yourself, here is the percentage of the board's time that's focused on student outcomes, whatever percentage you wound up with. So most of you, kind of all told together, it's probably somewhere in the 15% range, given everybody's different answers. So you all suggest collectively you spend about 15% of your time really focusing down on student outcomes. But previously, you also gave yourself a rating from 0 to 10 of how focused am I on the reason for which school system exists. I am now inviting you to consider that those two cannot be separated, that they are directly related to each other. And so as you're looking at those two, what are you noticing? Make it an I statement. I would like to pretend, and I want you to be clear, it is purely pretending, that my assessment of board performance and my assessment of my performance are completely different. I am suggesting to you, friends, that is purely pretending. Pretending that is designed to help make me look good at the cost of just taking a really candid deep dive into kind of what's working, what's not working, and what's my role in it. Therein lies the opportunity to evaluate. As I look at the board's overall performance, what percentage of our time is focused on student outcomes? And I look at the score I gave myself for how focused am I, what are you noticing? Make it a nice statement. Who will be the next to share?
I could do a better job of evaluating the board documents that we get. Like we get, pages and pages of policies that we've got to deal with and make decisions on. And so I can do a better job of trying to think strategically when we're trying to unravel like all the craziness that goes on in teacher certification, for an example. How do I link back the choices that I'm making around making policies easier for teachers when it comes to getting certification? How do I more concretely link that in my head to, is this improving student outcomes, right? Is it geared towards that? Because it just seems like a lot of what we do seems very disconnected from that. But I know it's stuff we have to do, right? I mean, it's part of our kind of policy domain. So are there ways, the things that are less essentially associated with that focus on student outcomes, are there ways for us to not get hung up, for me to help us not get hung up in the weeds on some of that, because we really need to be spending more of our time focused on something else. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah. This is not an uncommon thing of trying to figure out, there are all these things that we gotta do. And I've seen the list of things that the state legislature has assigned to you, and it is a lengthy list. And so part of what I hear you saying is it's hard to know which of these are enabling and which of these are scoring. And let me describe what I mean by that. Like in a basketball game, how do you score a point?
Taking a shot.
Close. Making a shot, yeah. It's not taking shots. You do not get points for taking shots. But taking shots is an enabling act. It is very rare that you will score on a shot that you did not take. I actually seen it happen a couple times. But for the most part, if you're not shooting, you're probably not going to score. And so shooting is an enabling action. But you don't get points for having shot the ball. You only get points for the ball going through the hoop without violating any rules and within regulation. And that is what scoring is. And everything that's not scoring is enabling. Now, some enablers are more tightly correlated with scoring than others. Shooting the ball is probably more tightly correlated with scoring than how many people showed up to watch the basketball game. Like the size of the audience is probably less correlated with scoring than whether or not we actually shot the ball. Passing. Like if I pass the ball to the person who then scores, do I get a point for having passed the ball? Is that how the scoring works? No. No, you don't. But somebody had to pass the ball. So passing is a critical enabler. If nobody passes the ball, scoring's not going to happen. If somebody doesn't shoot, it's unlikely that scoring is going to happen. And so these are enabling behaviors. And it's important that you all focus the appropriate amount of energy and effort on what are the things that are going to enable scoring. And just to make sure we're following on this thing. In a school system, what is scoring? Yeah, student outcomes, all right, just making sure we're on the same page. All right, so the only measure for whether or not the school system is scoring is, are we seeing improvements in student outcomes? Are we seeing growth in what it is the students doing or able to do? But there's a lot of enabling actions. Part of the challenge that we face in the governance domain is trying to figure out which of these enablers are closer, have a stronger correlation, and which of them have a lesser one. Which ones are measures of passing and measures of shooting, and which ones are measures of how many cars are in the parking lot of the game. And once we figure that out, our coaching is overinvest your focus. In addition to being focused on student outcomes, overinvest your time on the enablers that are closest to scoring. Overinvest your time on things that, if we do this well, it has the strongest impact on the likelihood of us actually scoring for children, of children actually growing in what they know and able to do. And importantly, aggressively minimize any time that we're spending on things that we consider to have a weak correlation with scoring. That if there is something that we could do this perfectly all day, every day, and the likelihood that any children benefit from it is slim, how do we aggressively minimize our time focused on that? And so part of the coaching we offer is, we got to get clear about that. What are the, what does scoring look like for us? Those are the big runs. What are the high value enablers? Those are the hows that people have to have some consensus around. And then how do we aggressively find ways to minimize the amount of time we spend on everything else? Yeah.
So I had a thought, I've had some thoughts recently about sharing with board members that I think would answer your question. I've been wondering if we shouldn't be giving some consideration to the 4 committees that are established right now for this board. Do we have the right focus in these committees? And I could give you a specific example. This year I chair the SIP committee that focuses on school innovation and turnaround. My experience on the board, the primary focus has been charter schools as an innovative approach to school turnaround. I think it's worth a conversation to considering more focus on the innovative aspect as things like artificial intelligence become part of the conversation today, how relevant that is for students. I've shared with my colleagues when I go into schools and I talk to kids, they want to know, Mr. Morris, can you make education relevant? And so as we lead the effort for innovation in our schools for our state, I think that is an area of focus that would be worth discussing.
I really, really appreciate and enjoy this. So this is a common conversation that we bring up. What you all have done is fairly consistent with what most boards do. Like, so you have done the reasonable thing with your committees, is they seem fairly aligned to statutory obligations that you have. So we have a statutory obligation around, teachers and education, so let's have a committee for that. Statutory obligation around charter, let's have a committee for that, so on and so forth. So you've got these 4 committees, and each of them seem to be fairly kind of operationally aligned with what I would describe as statutory obligations. And you can continue doing that. We're not going to suggest to you there's any problem with that, so feel free to keep that if you have to keep it. But to your point, I would invite you to consider, is that an opportunity to rethink how we organize our work? Maybe instead of organizing committees around statutory obligations, maybe we organize committees around the most high potency enablers. Like, what do we, let's say we're just committed to having 4 committees, which I don't recommend. Like, you shouldn't just have an arbitrary number. What if we said,
I just want to be clear, interrupt you, I just want to be clear. I'm not asking to add any work to this process, right? I'd just like to see it be more focused.
Sure.
That's what I'm saying. What if instead of having existing factors that you have, what if you said, let's think through this as a body and look, what are the 3 or 4 most potent enablers? Like, if we win in these areas of adult outcomes, essentially, it's going to have the largest leverage impact on moving the needle for kids. And let's have, 3 or 4 committees that be our 3 or 4 committees, instead of the ones that are more kind of statutory aligned. Then somebody invariably asks, well, hold on, AJ, don't we have to do these statutory things? Yes, I'm saying find a different way to do them. One of the things when I was Deputy Commissioner of Education next door in Texas, that I was responsible for was our investigations team. And when I first arrived, basically what we seemed to do is when something came in that seemed worthy of investigation, like we get started on that, and then the next week, and we just do them in order that they came through. But we didn't really prioritize how we did them. And so one of the things we switched out is we said, okay, we aren't getting all of these done to begin with, and doing them in the order they came in the door doesn't really make a lot of sense. So what we did is we redesigned our framework for investigations and said, which ones do we think have the largest impact on student outcomes or student health and well-being? Those move to the front of the stack. And for these other ones that we, through our criteria, are much lower and they're much less enablers than these other things are, let's figure out a more expeditious way to follow the statute to address those, but to essentially get them off our plate as quickly as possible so that we can focus on these high enabler areas of investigations. This is what I recommend to any state officials is there's no way you're ever going to accomplish with a fulsome vigor every single thing that the legislature has put on your plate. Like that ship is already sailed. If you're not familiar with that, I apologize for being the one to explain it to you. What there is to do in the context of that then is figure out, okay, what are the things that are most worthy of our time because they have the biggest impact on student outcomes? And how do we figure out how to comply with the laws? Certainly. Nobody roll out of here. AJ said we don't have to follow the law. He didn't say that. What are the ways that we can comply with the statute, but in a way that takes less time so that we can focus on the areas of our obligations that have the biggest impact? And I think if you all looked at your committee structure, you might actually see that that's an example of that, where we could redesign this. We could erase the 4 we've got, adopt 3 different, and actually have more impact than what we did when we had 4. So I think that is absolutely something that I would encourage you to investigate. And I think the first step is you got to get clear about what are our big rocks first, and then after that, get some clarity around what are the areas of how that are most influential. But then go all in on those few focus areas, and then work with your superintendent and your staff to figure out how do we make sure that we aren't letting the other things go not compliant, but that we move them to a state of compliance while we put more energy into these areas that are going to have a bigger impact for our students. And I think that is a powerful insight as you reflect on what could I do differently, and what am I noticing as I'm looking at how we focus it and my own performance. Other reflection on this. You all brought up a really great conversation. I want to transition to the next piece. But any other reflection on this before we transition? Other reflection before we transition?
Lunch is ready.
I was imagining that was the transition. Other reflections on this before we transition? Then I just want to, as our outro, which this will set us up for our time together post-lunch, I just want to go down the road and see. I think we started here last time, so we're going to switch back and we're going to come to this end this time and go back this direction. And not looking for explanations, not looking for a lot of details, just looking to the answer you wrote to question number 4. What answer did you write for question number 4? We're just going to start down here, we're going to go down the road real quick. So what did you write down for question number 4?
That question was goals?
Yes. What are the board's adopted goals?
What I wrote down?
Yes.
Wrote down the question mark.
Gotcha. Thank you. Got it. Next. What did you write down?
I vote ask Lonnie.
I wrote ask, yeah. What do you have?
Okay, yes, I put a big question mark, but I just said, ask Dr. Brumley.
All right, what did you put down?
I started writing like individual ones, and then I realized that I just needed to stop because it wasn't a shared, like I couldn't come up with a shared one. The closest I came was that everybody's on the same page about we have to do something about it, and the teacher tries it.
Yeah, gotcha. Oh, yeah, that came up. Yeah, what did you write down?
I found it on this paper,
Right here.
educational priorities. I went, oh, there they are.
So how many educational priorities have you adopted?
5. And I didn't remember all of them.
So the priorities are 5.
All
It
right.
sounded like goals, yeah.
Goals and priorities.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep moving. What did you write down?
She's a staff member, I'll go. So there's the kindergarten ready to learn. For our 3rd through 8th graders, we have goals around their mastery of ELA and math. We have a goal around diverse, highly effective workforce and students graduating on time with college or career readiness.
What did you write down?
I can only speak for the agency, and ours are pretty clear. And they are the same as far as I know across the board, but what I would say is everything that we do as a team is aligned to trying to hit these marks.
Yeah, so I think there was an important distinction there. Superintendent Brumley made the goals for the board and the goals for the department. My comments were specific to the board, and what I said was not well stated or universally acknowledged.
Gotcha. What did you write down?
I answered with the education goals for the departments, about the other 5.
So you wrote down the 5 department goals. Yeah, what did you write down?
I wrote down the 6 critical goals that we have adopted on board for student outcomes.
The 6 critical goals.
Right.
This-
Better write on this little sheet.
Yeah, it's 6, not 6.
Right.
Well, there's goals and
Oh, there's
priorities.
goals, yeah.
Hey, look, y'all all talk about different things, and that's kind of why we're having this conversation. Yes.
Wasn't here when we were given the question.
What are the board's adopted goals?
But having gotten the question, I cheated, and I looked at our website. In the bottom right-hand corner of the About Us, we have 2 major goals. And they probably should be some more prominent place, so we all know them. I can read you.
Sure. What do you think the board's adopted goals are?
Well, it says, BESE will provide leadership in setting an education agenda for the continuous improvement of public education as measured by student and school achievement. And then second, BESE will strive to improve financing of public education as measured by the effective and efficient use of human and financial resources. That's what we say.
All right.
If I may.
Yes.
Because there's been talk about goals and priorities, and so I just want to articulate for us, this is sequential. So the goals begin with what we're trying to accomplish with our youngest learners, and they sequentially through the birth to 12th grade experience, because we have ECE, but also K-12, land beyond graduation. And then the priorities are essentially what are the things that we need to be doing and cultivating in order to achieve these goals. So I just, as a point of clarity, I want to provide that information.
So as an outro, as we head off to lunch, if you could only use one word to summarize what you just heard during this recitation of the board goals. If you could only use one word to summarize and describe what you just heard, what would that one word be?
Muddy.
Muddy.
I'm looking at these, Clay.
Clear. Broad.
I'm going with muddy.
Muddy.
Unshared.
Unshared. If you could only use one word to describe what you just witnessed with your colleagues, what would that one word be?
Inconsistency.
Inconsistent. Yeah.
Disorganized.
Disorganized.
Okay, the teacher in me says hyphenated word anchor chart. I need one.
I need an
at
anchor
every
chart.
meeting so I can go back to it.
No doubt, no doubt.
Incongruent?
Incongruent.
I was gonna say cloudy, but somebody took that.
Cloudy, yeah.
I was gonna say muddy, but I'll say cloudy.
Cloudy. With that as the thing that is percolating in your mind, know that part of what we're going to do when we come back is dig into what are some actual strategies that the board can engage. We're going to check out a little bit of what you all described about in the interviews, some areas that are worth highlighting, where there's already consensus, but also some areas where y'all got some decisions y'all need to make as a body, and then talk through some potential next steps. But all of that gets teed up by the one word you just offered here. With that, Madam Chair, let's give the people something to eat.
Sounds good to me.
What time are we coming back?
What do you guys want? How long would y'all like for lunch, board members? 30 minutes? Okay, so we'll be back at,
Let's round up and make it 40 after.
okay, 12:40.
12:40. My request is to be back, seated, fully present, fired up, ready to go, 40 after. Enjoy lunch.
You're welcome.